Chapter 833. Blue River Region. Spirit Sword Mountain. The siege of the fallen immortals had lasted for the 10th day. Prior to this, no one had imagined that Spirit Sword Mountain could persist for so long. In the face of the joint siege of dozens of immortals and many senior immortals, it was a miracle that a sect in the lower realm could persist for half a day. And this miracle happened 20 times in the end. Admittedly, this was more or less due to senior immortal Xiaoyao. If he hadn't asked Feng Yun and the others to slow down and disperse the power of the immortals, the mountain protection array of Spirit Sword Mountain would definitely not be able to support the full outbreak of the immortals. However, the real miracle creator was 9 regions, including both this land and the people on it. In the past 10 days, Spirit Sword Mountain had experienced countless life and death situations, and the stubborn cultivators had erupted with amazing cohesion. All the former enmity had been put down, and everyone was united to fight for survival. On the battlefield, one could see the demon-slaying guards fighting side by side with the great devil who had slaughtered thousands of people. One could see the treatment team of Kunlun Immortal Mountain doing their best to treat the rogue cultivators who had betrayed the sect. One could also see that the 5 super sects had made their own methods public so that others could learn from them. This was like the great unity of the world, which had never been realized even in the 15 years of Wang Lu's rule of 9 regions. However, in the past 10 days it had really happened. People could not help but sigh with emotion that it seemed that only when the end of the world came could they see the great sublimation of morality. However, it seemed that it was too late to sharpen the spear just before the battle. For an immortal level method like Stellar Sword Method, 10 days was not enough to even read it once, let alone learn from it. The tension of the frontline battle made the seriously injured cultivators often unable to leave the battlefield. There was no time for them to meditate and comprehend. However, at this time, the deepest engraving of the great array of 9 regions was activated by chance. Thus, the continent suddenly seemed to have awakened its own consciousness and began to save itself at all costs. On the one hand, 9 regions cut off the connection with the immortals, so that the immortals could no longer easily control the providence of 9 regions. On the other hand, 9 regions completely abandoned the principle of equivalent exchange and began to bless its own cultivators at all costs. In the past, the children of destiny would only appear once every few hundred or even 1,000 years, yet they were popping up like bamboo shoots after the rain. The cultivators of 9 regions found that they could repeatedly make breakthroughs in life and death situations. Not to mention those who were stuck at the peak stage, even many middle-level King Pill cultivators became Yuanying stage cultivators. There were even some who broke through from the King Pill realm all the way to the peak of the Soul Formation realm within 3 days. Although this realm was superficial and there were many hidden dangers, the speed of their progress was so fast that even Great Ancestor Dushing and Immortal Qin couldn't compare. With a combination of various factors, Spirit Sword Mountain finally survived to the 10th day under the indiscriminate bombardment of the immortals. Then, the situation of the battle finally reached an irreversible state of decay. More than half of the 12 peaks of Spirit Sword Mountain fell. Carefree Peak, Stellar Peak, Sword Tomb. Together, they formed the last line of defense. However, in the end, it was just a deathbed struggle, an arrow at the end of its flight. The elite forces of the Wanxian League that gathered in the mountains suffered heavy casualties. The new Red Guards were almost completely wiped out. The remaining Dixian people were all killed except for a few. The reinforcements from the western continent were trapped in the wreckage of the Clear Sky Peak. Golden King himself was seriously injured and unconscious. Aya's stubborn resistance had also lost the possibility of a breakthrough. The Death to Immortal Sword Array was personally broken twice by Senior Immortal Xiaoyao. 2 of the 4 immortal swords were broken, and Supreme Hichu, who presided over the array, was directly knocked down from Mahayana stage to Yuanying stage. Even the 9 regions map was almost taken away. The Zaku army of the Red Sea Underwater Workshop was in a slightly better condition. After Golden King was seriously injured, the 9-tailed fox took over the baton. The fox was cunning and astute, and she was once a servant of the immortal world. She knew herself and the enemy well. She successfully killed 3 or 4 immortals and even wounded Senior Immortal Lifeng, achieving one of the biggest results since the start of the war. However, under the huge gap in strength, the Zaku army was powerless to reverse the situation. More than half of the Zaku army were destroyed, and the main force, Xiang Liang and Qianghua, were seriously injured. The 9-tailed fox had to give up the initiative to attack and retreated behind the final line of defense. At this point, Spirit Sword Mountain no longer had the power to fight. There was only a group of people who were waiting for death, hiding behind the crumbling line of defense and pinning their final hope on the tower. Can Wang Lu come back or not? 5 days ago, when the situation of the battle took a turn for the worse, the Stellar Peak lost contact with Wang Lu. No matter how they called, there was no response. The passage opened by the Heavenly Tower was still there, and the passage between the two worlds had not disappeared, but there was no sound from it anymore. This was simply bad news. Therefore, except for a few people, the news was strictly kept secret from everyone else. However, when everyone was concentrated on the Stellar Peak, the so-called secrecy was just self-deception. On the other side, the mood of the immortals was not good either. They had thought that it would be a one-sided massacre, but in the end, the lowly beings of the lower realm had held on for 10 days, and they had even launched several sharp counterattacks, causing considerable casualties. More than 10 immortals had died in battle, and the rest were injured. Among the senior immortals, Lai Feng was the most seriously injured. It could be said that he had lost 500 years of cultivation base. Senior immortal Feng Yun was too fierce. Although he was not physically injured, his immortal path's law had been figured out. It could be said that he had suffered a big loss. Such a result was simply a serious blow to the immortal world, which was already declining in population. There were not many immortals alive today, so they really could not afford such a loss. In the final analysis, naturally, no one was willing to admit that the people of 9 regions were too strong and could already challenge the immortals. Thus, it could only be attributed to the poor command of the battle. The first to attack was senior immortal Feng Yun, the most unruly person among the senior immortals. Finally, he could fire at Xiaoyao without any scruples. I've long said that to deal with these bastards, we should use the power of thunder. They're like a pile of H*T. The longer we tangle with them, the more dirty our hands are. Why do you want to spread panic and despair to tie people's hands and feet? As a result, it's all our own people who are hurt. That's interesting. We don't need them as captives. What's the use of panic and despair of a group of people who are going to die? Can it make us happy? When we fought in the world, what haven't we seen? Do we still need this kind of porridge and side dishes to spice things up? Did His Majesty the Immortal King say to fight like this? Xiaoyao, what exactly do you want to do? Senior Immortal Feng Yun's words aroused the same feeling from many people. Others would not be like Feng Yun who would recklessly scold him, but they also looked forward to how Xiaoyao would answer. What I want to do has nothing to do with you. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao was still calm and collected. There was no trace of wavering on his handsome face. I'm not obliged to explain to you what I'm doing. You. Feng Yun was furious, but he had no way to refute it. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao was ranked first among the senior immortals, a respected figure under only one person in the immortal world. He was deeply trusted by the Immortal King and was only responsible to the Immortal King. No matter how absurd the things he did, there was no need to explain it to others. So, do you have the obligation to explain it to me? At this moment, the complexion of everyone present changed in an instant. Even Xiaoyao couldn't restrain himself and stood up. Immortal King. Your Majesty. At this time, it was not the Immortal King's body that appeared, but only his voice. However, even if the Immortal King only had his voice, it could not be ignored. Xiaoyao, come to see me in the Palace of 3 Purities. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao hesitated for a moment and said, Your Majesty, the situation here is not completely clear. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for me to go far. Not completely clear? Those bastards only have their last breath left. What's not clear about the situation? Your Majesty, humph, I think you want the situation to be more confusing. If it weren't for your wanton behavior, how could it take so much time for this group of bastards to be solved? The words of the Immortal King made Senior Immortal Feng Yun's eyes lit up. However, no matter how unruly he was, at this time, the Immortal King was talking to Xiaoyao, so he never dared to interrupt halfway. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao was silent for a moment and said, Your Majesty, I can swear that I have never done anything that harms the interests of the immortal world. My arrangement in Spirit Sword Mountain is not for my own selfish interest. Of course I know that you're not doing it for your own selfish interest. And although there are many doubtful points in your actions, they are indeed for the great plan of the immortal world. If not, how could I allow you to live until now? Senior Immortal Xiaoyao said, Your Majesty, please understand. So, I'll give you a chance to come to the Palace of 3 Purities and explain all this to me. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao pondered for a moment and hesitated. Of course, he didn't want to go to the Palace of Three Purities, but how could he disobey the order of the Immortal King? In fact, with Xia Yu's temper, even if you had a reasonable explanation, once you disobeyed his order, it would still be a dead end. So, just as Xiaoyao was about to open his mouth to agree to this matter, suddenly, a mechanism placed in a distant place was triggered. A strange smile appeared on Senior Immortal Xiaoyao's face. Your Majesty, I'm sorry. I can't comply. Very well, then I'll come to you. The next moment, the sky of 9 regions was torn apart. A burly figure, in the distortion of light and shadow, slowly descended on 9 regions. The real body of the immortal King Xia Yu finally arrived. Chapter 834. Since ancient times, it has been said in 9 regions that when the immortals descended to the lower realm, there must be a vision. In the Age of Desolation, the immortals in the lower realm were often accompanied by thousands of miles of colorful clouds and golden light. The shrouded place was filled with intoxicating fragrance, and there were invisible drums and flutes playing the sounds of nature. Its grandeur and magnificence were as if the 9 regions was welcoming the traveler who returned home with the grandest courtesy. Compared with the high and mighty immortal world, the 9 regions was just a starting point. Cultivators cultivated here and comprehended the truth of heaven and earth. Once they achieved something, they would break through the sky and enter a new world. Since the birth of the civilization of the 9 regions, there have been many cultivators who have succeeded in their cultivation over the countless years, but only a few of them were willing to return. It was reasonable for the 9 regions to treat these immortals who returned home in glory with courtesy. However, it turned out that the stories passed down from ancient times were not necessarily true. Since Mr. Feng Yu came to the lower realm, the number of immortals who came to 9 regions had been more than 100. But how could there be any vision between heaven and earth? In fact, how could the 9 regions have a good face for this group of immortals who were determined to destroy the 9 regions? The so-called vision that was passed down from ancient times was mostly those vain immortals playing and singing with immortal method. Until this time, the Supreme of the immortal world tore the wall of space and slowly descended from the sky of the Blue River region. At this moment, the dark and tumbling clouds suddenly condensed, and the lightning arcs that lingered in the clouds no longer jumped. Even the astral wind in the sky stopped whistling and became silent. The space solidified, as if time no longer flowed. When the immortal king descended, there was no gorgeous and magnificent immortal aura, only a heavy pressure that fell on the hearts of the people. This was a rare vision in the 9 regions in 10,000 years. The continent did not show any welcome etiquette, but it clearly showed its own fear. The 9 regions was afraid of the arrival of the immortal king. At the same time, the immortals around the stellar peaks stopped their movements and looked up at the figure of the immortal king. Then, from Xiaoyao, Lifeng, Qinglu, Feng Yun, all the senior immortals and immortals bowed down one by one to show their allegiance to the immortal king. They even completely forgot that they were on the battlefield and that there were a large number of enemies not far in front of them. However, the cultivators of the Wanxian League had no time to fight back, because their bodies were heavier than ever. And the magical power in their jade mansion tended to condense. Let alone fight back, it was very difficult to even maintain their own method. And all of this was because an uninvited guest had come to the 9 states. The immortal king of immortal King Xia Yu. Even the most spirited of cultivators felt despair in their hearts at this moment. Even if the 9 regions had the 4 powers at iming immortals of the immortals, the world, the regions, the immed king and world realm 9 regions of King Imals, even if the world of the 9 of Imals could have the of im if the of however, after the arrival of the immortal King Xia Yu, he did not get rid of the Spirit Sword Mountain. His attention was only focused on one person. Xiaoyao, do you want me to walk over to see you? Senior Immortal Xiaoyao smiled bitterly and nodded. Then, his figure turned into a rainbow light and flashed to the distant 9th heaven in front of Xia Yu. At this point, the 2 immortals faced each other, less than 3 feet apart. Except for Xiaoyao, no immortal had ever been so close to the immortal king. Xiaoyao, why did you betray me? In the immortal world, Senior Immortal Xiaoyao was the closest to the immortal king. However, while he enjoyed the respect, he would also be subject to extremely strict restrictions. Xia Yu never gave his subordinates unconditional trust. When he gave Senior Immortal Xiaoyao the authority, he also left a mark on him. Once there was a trace of disobedience and betrayal in Senior Immortal Xiaoyao's heart, the immortal king would know. After Senior Immortal Xiaoyao descended to the lower realm, His every move was naturally seen by Xiaoyu. Then, the immortal king strangely found that Xiaoyao's behavior was completely unreasonable. It was as if he deliberately allowed the people of 9 regions to linger on. This was completely contrary to the purpose of the Great Purge plan. There was not much time left in the immortal world. If the 9 regions could not be cleaned up as soon as possible and refined as a sacrifice, then everything would be over. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao delaying time at this time was already an out-and-out traitor behavior. However, at the same time, Xiaoyu did not feel any betrayal from Xiaoyao at all. He was still loyal to the immortal world and never disobeyed his instructions. In that case, how could all this be explained? Thus, he summoned Xiaoyao and asked him to return to the Palace of 3 Purities to explain everything. Unexpectedly, Xiaoyao suddenly refused him and disobeyed his order. This was an obvious sign of rebellion. Xiaoyao actually betrayed him? The surprise in Xiaoyu's heart was indescribable. For this reason, he did not hesitate to drag his injured immortal body to 9 regions to find out. Your Majesty the Immortal King, I have never betrayed anyone. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao took a deep breath and said frankly, I swore allegiance to the immortal world, not to anyone in the immortal world. What a joke. Do you want to say that my existence hinders the interests of the immortal world? Your Majesty, forgive me for asking you a question. How long have you lived? The immortal King Xiaoyu's heart turned cold. What do you know? The confrontation between the immortal king and senior immortal Xiaoyao took place above the 9th heaven. While the 2 sides were talking, the remaining soldiers in Spirit Sword Mountain also got a little breathing room. When the immortal king focused his attention on Xiaoyao, the oppressive force that deterred the entire realm also disappeared. People were finally able to breathe and move freely, but in despair, no one could raise any fighting spirit. Only a small number of people could maintain their immortal heart in a desperate situation. On the stellar peak, Lu Li blinked her eyes and asked curiously, what are they doing? Not far from Lu Li, Heavenly Fox shook her burnt 9 tails in boredom and said, those 2 people? Of course they're talking. Could it be a blind date? Alas, Your Majesty the Immortal King actually came forward in person. This time, we really have no chance to sing. Is the Immortal King that powerful? Zhu Shiyao's eyes lit up and she was eager to try. The fox girl was going crazy. I say, that's enough. Just now your 2 hands were broken, and you were finally saved by that black ghost, yet you still want to fight? Moreover, can't you see how big the gap between you and the Immortal King is? Let alone you, who has an inferior body, even if Wang Lu himself comes back, he can't be the opponent of the Immortal King. That giant divine weapon is at most at the level of Senior Immortal Xiaoyao. There's no way we can fight it. Since the Immortal King is so strong, it would be a pity if we can't fight it and verify our swordsmanship. Oh, it's hard for you to say a complete sentence. It seems that breaking through to deity stage is still helpful to your IQ. But save it as soon as possible. That's not the way to die. With that, the fox girl suppressed Zhu Shiyao's request with a tough attitude. Stay here honestly. Even if we are going to die, we have to fight for as much time as possible to survive, even if it's just 1 more breath. Life is very precious. Then the fox girl raised her head and looked at the highest point of the stellar peak at this time, the tower that had broken through the space barrier. Wang Lu, can you come back or not? Little Ling Air. I really want to see you. On the stellar peak, in a simple pharmacy, Elder Guanhai carefully covered a layer of ointment on the broken arm of the wounded person in front of him. He saw that there were countless black gas on the cross-section, but when it was touched by the ointment, it melted like snow and disappeared without a trace. Junior brother Zhang Shang, do you feel better? Well, there's no problem anymore. Senior brother really uses medicine like a god. The wounded person shrugged and showed a bright smile on his face. It seems that I can still fight a few more times. Lu, put on my armor. Zhang Shang said as he used his remaining hand to put on a layer of immortal armor. Elder Guanhai was surprised. You still want to fight? As long as I'm alive, of course, I have to fight. Senior brother, you don't have to worry about me. My life has long been scheduled to end on the battlefield, and this time, it's a worthy death. Moreover, with Lu accompanying me, I won't be lonely. Oh, that's not right. It should be said that this time, everyone will come to accompany me. Don't let third brother hear that. Ha ha ha, third brother is an old-fashioned guy. He was obviously not like this before. In a remote corner, Zhou Mumu reclined under a towering tree in a daze. Master, this disciple is unfilial and will soon see you. Well, it's a pity that in the end, we still lost this war, and the 9 regions couldn't be saved. However, Master, your heroic fighting posture has indeed been imprinted in everyone's mind. No one will ever laugh at our Kunlun immortal sect for having an empty history but no responsibility. What are you doing? When Zhou Mumu heard this voice, she stood up in a panic and said, Zhan Zai, what are you doing here? Moreover, where's your agent who is responsible for guiding your words and deeds? At this time, what do I need an agent for? Do I still need to care about whether my EQ is high or not, and whether I can make friends or not? Moreover, she's already dead. Zhou Mumu slightly lowered her head and said, Oh, what a pity. Everyone is going to die anyway. Zhan Zai shook his head, and the wound began to ooze blood again. So, I have something to say to you. Look for me? Do you have something to say? Zhan Zai took a deep breath and made the boldest decision in his life. Senior brother, the line of defense has been rebuilt. Lu Li cupped his hands toward the old man in the bamboo room. In the middle of the room, the old man with the vicissitudes of life slowly nodded. Compared with not long ago, Feng Yin looked even older. With his current peak deity stage strength, his actual fighting power surpassed Dixian's strength, and his lifespan should be extremely long, but at this time he looked old. Senior brother, Wang Lu, Feng Yin said. Wang Lu has done everything he can do. We are too dependent on him. I see. So, does the Sky Tower need to be closed? No need, just keep it open like that. Feng Yin said, although I know all this is just an extravagant hope, I always feel that eldest senior brother will never abandon us. In the most critical time, he will definitely come forward. Lu Li said, Senior brother, please don't belittle yourself. After eldest senior brother Ouyang Shang died, it was you who led Lingjian's school out of the mire. And every time I encounter a difficult situation, I will think of eldest senior brother in my heart, and then I will be motivated to persevere. Feng Yin sighed and said, and now, I can't help but start to miss him. I think he should come back. Well, maybe. Lu Li shook his head indifferently and was about to leave. However, the moment he turned around, he suddenly saw a familiar figure outside the bamboo room. The next moment, Lu Li's eyes widened and his mouth opened wide. An indescribable surge of emotions filled his heart. Chapter 835. Xiaoyao, is this the reason why you betrayed me? If your majesty must think that this is a betrayal, I have nothing to say. However, you should understand who was the first to betray the immortal world from being the head of all the worlds in the past to its current situation. The current immortal world is still the head of all the worlds. Yes, the immortal world has been at war for many years, destroying all the worlds and dominating the ruins. Your Majesty, when you ascended the throne, you didn't promise us that. Above the 9th heaven, the conversation between the immortal King Xiaoyu and Xiaoyao continued. For thousands of years, Xiaoyu had lived in the Palace of Three Purities. Except for senior immortal Xiaoyao, no one had ever had such a long conversation with him. Xiaoyu always had unusual patience and tolerance for Xiaoyao. Even today, when senior immortal Xiaoyao had unabashedly admitted his betrayal of the immortal king, this patience was still not exhausted. Xiaoyu looked at Xiaoyao with a complicated look and said, Xiaoyao, how long have you lived? Senior immortal Xiaoyao said, 13,500 years. In the immortal world, I am relatively young. Thanks to your Majesty's appreciation, I can have today's achievements, but, before he could finish, he was interrupted by Xiaoyu. Do you know how long I have lived? Senior immortal Xiaoyao pondered for a moment. He had long suspected this question, and at the same time, he also had his own speculation. Your Majesty ascended the throne of the immortal king 30,000 years ago. If we calculate this, I have lived for 100,000 years. What? Although senior immortal Xiaoyao had long suspected the lifespan of the immortal king Xiaoyu, he was surprised to hear the answer from the immortal king himself. This was much longer than he expected, and it had already exceeded common sense. Immortals were not really immortal. Generally speaking, the average immortal, that was, the level of true immortal, could live for 10,000 years. In 9 regions, they were the giants of all ages. At the level of senior immortal, their lifespan could be extended to 20,000 years. As for the immortal king except for Xiaoyu, Only a few people in the history of the immortal world had reached this realm. According to the records of the predecessors, the lifespan of the immortal king was 50,000 years. By special means, it could be extended to 60 to 70,000 years, and it was impossible to live any longer. Everyone would eventually die. This was the supreme law that encompassed all worlds, and no life form could escape from it. The more one defied the heavens, the heavier the restrictions of the laws would be. If one wanted to prolong their time, they would have to put in a lot of effort. Before Xueqi, there was once an immortal king who pursued longevity at all costs, but in the end, he fell on his 75,000th birthday. He used all the resources of the entire immortal world and gave it his all, but the result was nothing more than extending his lifespan by 5,000 years. Yet, Xueqi said that he had lived for 100,000 years. Just how much did he have to pay to achieve this? It was simply unimaginable. No, it wasn't that hard to imagine. The world of immortals had gone from being the supreme ruler of all worlds to a lone island in the middle of ruins. Tens of thousands of immortals had either died in the fires of war or had died due to the changes in the laws of the world when it was in decline. Even the once vast and boundless world of immortals had split into countless fragments. At first, people had thought that this was a natural change in the laws of the world. It was similar to how the people of 9 regions treated the Age of Chaos. But now it seemed that the Age of Chaos in 9 regions originated from the plundering of 9 regions by the immortal world. The destruction of the immortal world was clearly the price Xueqi had to pay for his 100,000 years of life. Your Majesty, for the sake of your own selfishness, can you even ignore the immortal world? Immortal cultivation is for one's own selfishness. Xueqi said unceremoniously. Otherwise, what's the purpose of immortal cultivation? Wine, women, avarice, and temper? Power over the world? In that case, why do you need to ascend to the immortal world? You can be like a fish in water in 9 regions. The essence of immortal cultivation is to seek longevity. There is great horror between life and death. It is this horror that drives generations of cultivators to explore the immortal path. You should understand this truth. But what's the point of this kind of struggling at death's door? Xueqi said, you have only lived for 10,000 years, so naturally, you are far from experiencing the wonderful taste of longevity. When you live for 100,000 years like me, you can naturally understand the feeling of longevity. Indeed, for the current me, every day I live has to pay an amazing price, but at the same time, I will also get amazing pleasure. Heh, equivalent exchange, this is also the supreme law in the world. I see. Maybe your Majesty really has your own reasons. But please forgive me for not agreeing with it. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao said seriously. Like I said, I am loyal to the immortal world, not to your Majesty the immortal king. Your Majesty destroyed the immortal world for his own selfishness. Xueqi said, so, what if I say I will share longevity with you? Xiaoyao was surprised and said, share longevity with me? Why? As a senior immortal in the immortal world, Xiaoyao knew very well that there were many things that could not be shared by a king. Xueqi attached so much importance to longevity that he wished he could use all the resources in the world in exchange for the extension of life. How could such a person share longevity with others? Unless, the next moment, Xueqi solved the mystery. It could be said that it was not unexpected. Because you are my child. Xueqi said, your mother is a great cultivator, but unfortunately, I can't give her a proper title. That's why I've never told anyone about your identity. However, among my many children, only you have truly inherited my mantle. Like Xia Xiaohe, she is just a fool who used the name of the immortal king's daughter to act recklessly. Her death is not worth pitying. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao found it difficult to calm down. He had thousands of words to say, but he didn't know where to start. His path in the immortal world was too smooth. The immortal king Xueqi was almost obedient to him. Many people joked that he was the illegitimate son of the immortal king, which deeply violated his taboo. But unexpectedly, the joking words of the past turned out to be true. He was really the son of the immortal king. However, even if I'm your child, for you, I'm just a relatively high-level sacrifice. In order to live a long life, you can even ignore the whole immortal world, let alone a mere son. No, you're wrong. Only you, I will not sacrifice in any case. Because you are the key to my longevity. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao was shocked again. Do you want to reincarnate? Just like how you dealt with Xia Xiaohe and the others, you want to use my body to prolong your existence? No, my existence has pretty much come to an end. The immortal King Xiaoyu sighed with desolation. In the past tens of thousands of years, I have exhausted all my means. The time limit of 100,000 years is my limit. Even if I clean up the 9 regions this time, it will not help me to continue to prolong my life. Then, I have done all this for you. After I die, you will inherit everything from me and become the new me. You should have heard the saying that children are the continuation of their parents' life. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao sneered. I don't want to continue your life. I am me, and I will never become anyone else. Xiaoyu said with desolation. I have said this sentence of yours 70,000 years ago. Whether you admit it or not, you are almost a copy of me at that time. Xiaoyao, since you entered the immortal world, your every move has been under my control. What makes you think that you can really become an independent individual? Senior Immortal Xiaoyao was silent. Thinking of the care that the immortal king had given him in the past years, sweat gradually oozed from his forehead. So, including your rebellion, it's actually not unexpected to me. If it were me at that time, I would probably do the same thing. You want to delay time and let that lower realm bastard come back, but do you really think he can change anything? Senior Immortal Xiaoyao had nothing to say. He indeed had high expectations for Wang Lu. However, if all this had fallen into the immortal king's calculation, then his so-called expectations for Wang Lu were just a pipe dream. In the silence of Senior Immortal Xiaoyao, the immortal king suddenly raised his hand, and an invisible wave spread to the distance, silently breaking the connection between the heavenly tower of Stellar Peak and the wreckage of the passage between the two worlds. Now he can't come back. However, at this moment, a playful laughter came in. What a pity, you two, I'm back. Chapter 836. Half an hour ago, in 9 regions, a long-lost figure appeared on the stellar peak. Lu Li wiped his eyes in disbelief, ignoring the fact that his pair of spirit eyes had long been comparable to that of an immortal, and there would be no hallucinations. The appearance of this person was simply too inconceivable, and it made one's heart surge. Lingjian School, Wanxian League, and even the entire 9 regions had been looking forward to his return for too long, so that most people even felt desperate about his return. In the midst of despair, hope quietly came. Wang Lu actually came back. Just when Lu Li couldn't help but exclaim, the young man outside the bamboo room turned his head and covered his mouth with his index finger, indicating that he should not make a sound. Then, a familiar voice sounded in Lu Li's mind. Don't make it public. Lu Li was stunned and asked why. Feng Yin stood up and put his hand on Lu Li's shoulder and said, Big brother. No, since Wang Lu said that, he must have his intention. Don't you want to be discovered? Wang Lu nodded and said, I wanted to appear in an above-board manner, but since that guy is here. With that, he pointed to the immortal King Xiaoyu in the sky behind him and said, Then it's necessary to change the way of thinking. Feng Yin said through primordial spirit, The power of the immortal king is indeed too strong. There's no chance of winning in a head-on confrontation, but even if he wanted to do something unconventional, with such a huge gap in strength between the two sides, what tricks could he play? Of course, Feng Yin could see that Wang Lu was no longer the same as before. He didn't know what kind of adventure he had in the passage between the two worlds, but his strength was not inferior to that of Senior Immortal Xiaoyao, the strongest among the Senior Immortals. However, it was still too far away from Xiaoyu's terrifying power that could freeze time and space with just a raise of his hand. After all, the giant divine weapon was just a work of Dixian. Even if the synchronization rate was pushed to 100%, it could not reach the realm of the immortal king. If Wang Lu could come back earlier and completely seal the passage between the immortal world and 9 regions, there might be a possibility of saving the situation, but now, I need you to do 2 things. Wang Lu said, First, everything is as usual. Don't let anyone know that I'm back. Second, give me the 9 regions map. The 9 provinces map has been damaged. Of course it will be damaged. The southern heaven region was destroyed by the reverse G-Saurus pillar. 9 regions has lost one of its continents, so it would be strange if the 9 regions map was not damaged. However, the damaged 9 regions map is still the 9 regions map. If you want to control the rest of the 8 regions in the Spirit Sword Mountain, you have to use the 9 regions map. Feng Yin frowned. He really couldn't figure out what was the point of Wang Lu's obsession with a damaged 9 regions map at this time, but since he said so, I'll go find he too later, but he too was seriously injured before, and now he's relying on the 9 regions map to prolong his life. I can't guarantee, Wang Lu smiled. That won't do. Next, I have to get the 9 provinces map. For me, the 9 provinces map is much more important than the river diagram itself. Feng Yin could not help but be stunned. The implication of Wang Lu's words was obviously that he would not hesitate to kill and seize the treasure. But that was he too, the one who presided over the death to immortal sword array and made great contributions in successive battles. Moreover, it was thanks to Hichu Daoren that Wang Lu was able to jump from the lead disciple of Ling Jian's school to the #1 person in 9 regions during the grand competition. It could be said that although he too was not Wang Lu's guide on the immortal path, there was no doubt that he was indebted to him. But now, Wang Lu wanted to take away He Tu's life easily? Rationally, this was not unacceptable. How could the life of He Tu be compared with the overall situation of 9 regions? But Wang Lu's face also sank. Sect leader, I know that you have always been soft-hearted, but at this time, a woman's kindness will only make the sacrifice of the predecessors worthless. In order to avoid people's eyes and ears, I can't leave your bamboo courtyard now. Otherwise, I would have gone to get it myself. Don't let me take this unnecessary risk. Feng Yin sighed. I know. With a slightly heavy step, Feng Yin left his bamboo room. However, when he stepped out of the door, he suddenly looked back and asked, Where is 5th junior sister? Wang Lu smiled but did not answer. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Feng Yin returned to the bamboo room with a map that was more than half incomplete and handed it over to Wang Lu. He died very peacefully. He said that you will definitely lead the rest of the people to the end. Wang Lu was silent for a moment, and then a trace of compassion flashed in his eyes. I see. Next, please leave for a while. When I cast the spell, no one can be around. Of course, Feng Yin and Lu Li had countless questions to ask, but at this time, they had no choice but to leave. When he was alone, Wang Lu immediately unfolded the 9 regions map and pressed it with one hand. In a twinkling of an eye, countless lines from all over the world were linked to him. It was just that many of them were intermittent and looming. This was a sign that the 9 regions had become fragile. Although the reverse G-Saurus pillar seemed to have only destroyed the southern heaven region, the deeper level of destruction had undoubtedly spread to every corner of the 9 regions. At the same time, many functions of the damaged 9 regions map could not be activated. With a solemn look, Wang Lu let the immortal spirit in his body wander in the map, trying his best to repair the damage. Soon after, his brows relaxed and a smile appeared on his face. The most important thing was still there. The next moment, there was a bit more sadness in his heart. In the case that the whole 9 regions map was damaged, this thing was still intact, which was obviously the credit of Hichu Daoren. At first, he just mentioned it casually, but Hichu had been seriously building it for a long time. Don't worry, brother Hichu, I won't let your sacrifice be in vain, Wang Lu whispered to himself. Then, he integrated himself deeper into the 9 regions map. With the help of the magical ability of this map, his consciousness spread throughout the 9 regions and found the person who had been waiting for a long time. It was a group of gentle holy light, with a vague outline of a person, but without facial features. Faceless, long time no see. Yes, long time no see, my master. Faceless voice sounded a bit lost. Master, are you going to use the final plan? Yes, let our people get ready. In theory, they are always ready for the arrival of the Judgment Day, which is written in the doctrine. However, I'm afraid no one can imagine what the true face of the Judgment Day is. Wang Lu sneered and said, Can't imagine? The fallen immortals are about to sink the entire 9 regions. If they can't think that the Judgment Day is coming, then their faith is too insincere. Well, don't talk nonsense, get ready to start. The group of light that constituted Faceless shook slightly, and then, in a cadenced tone, recited the words that had been prepared for a long time. It was a strange language that could not be described by any words. Every tone contained infinite meaning. With the recitation of Faceless, a stream of holy light lit up in the 9 regions, and then along the hidden passage, like rivers flowing into the sea, gathered in one place, gathered in Wang Lu's hand. At first, it was just a trivial ball of light, but soon with the convergence of the stream of holy light, it began to expand rapidly. In the blink of an eye, Feng Yin's bamboo room was filled with holy light. Wang Lu frowned and squeezed the holy light in his hand to the size of a fist again. However, at this time, the light had shown a dazzling golden light, accompanied by blazing heat, like a small sun. The gathering of holy light continued. Along the 9 regions map, tens of millions of holy light surged. So much so that Wang Lu, the Lord of Holy Light, gradually could not suppress this energy. The mass of light in his palm changed from white to gold, from gold to blood, and finally turned into a mass of dark. The energy contained in it was so huge that it could be described as soul-stirring. If it broke out carelessly, even a senior immortal would find it difficult to escape death. Such a terrifying energy naturally did not come out of thin air. Wang Lu clenched the dark energy ball in his hand, and his ears seemed to ring with the wailing of hundreds of millions of people. The so-called Judgment Day. To put it bluntly, it was a grand blood sacrifice. In the name of the Sea of Holy Light, Wang Lu ignited the holy light in the body of every believer in 9 regions, and then gathered the burning energy in one place. Holy light religion had been spreading in 9 regions for a long time. With the help of Wisdom Sect, holy light was almost everywhere, and there were tens of billions of pious believers. Although most of these believers were just ordinary people, the simultaneous ignition of trillions of believers was enough to create a world-destroying miracle. Of course, the price was too tragic. With the launch of the Judgment Day by Wang Lu, hundreds of millions of believers on the continent fell down in a daze and lost their vitality forever. Among them were lovers, loving mothers, generous elders, and lively teenagers. Hundreds of millions of creatures, hundreds of millions of families, were turned into nothingness by Wang Lu. He had no doubt that if the sky had not been torn apart, there would have been countless heavenly tribulation lightning falling on his head at this time. However, all of this was necessary. Without the Judgment Day, it was impossible for the broken 9 regions to provide such a huge amount of energy in a short period of time, let alone support Wang Lu to activate the array hidden in the deepest part of the 9 regions map. It's easy to say that I have to carry the fate of the dead, but now I have no choice. If the immortal world succeeds, everyone will die. By sacrificing some people to save everyone, can I be regarded as a partner of justice? With a trace of self-deprecating smile, Wang Lu slowly pressed the black ball in his hand into the 9 regions map. The moment the figure of the light ball completely disappeared, this immortal treasure that carried the thousands of years of history of Xueqi sect began to burn. In the fire, Wang Lu looked up, and his eyes had become firm. Very good. All the preparations are in place. Next, it's time to give the 2 people who are talking excitedly a surprise. The next moment, his figure flashed and appeared above the 9th heaven, facing Xiaoyu and Xiaoyao head-on. Chapter 837. It's you? Xiaoyu could not hide his surprise. Because no matter how he thought about it, at this moment, Wang Lu should not be here. He had personally confirmed the thickness of the space barrier between the 2-world passage and the 9 regions. Even if the people of 9 regions imitated the Gisaurus pillar and broke through part of the barrier, in order to accommodate living people, the person at the other end of the passage must at least have the strength of a peak senior immortal. But how could that be possible? Without the purification of immortal spirit and the support of the immortal path laws of the immortal world, how could there be a peak senior immortal in 9 regions? An elephant could not be bred in an ant's nest, and a whale could not grow in a puddle. The limit of 9 regions had been confirmed by the first group of immortals who ascended to the immortal world millions of years ago. That was the most powerful and dreamlike era in 9 regions. Those who walked on the earth were all powerful people with magical abilities. The great beasts were born with the power to move mountains and fill the seas, and when they grew up, they were comparable to true immortals. Human beings were born with spirit root, and the path of immortal cultivation was smooth and unimpeded. At that time, there was no systematic immortal path. People explored the road ahead by their own ability. Some traveled thousands of miles in one go, while others struggled step by step. After hundreds of thousands of years of exploration and accumulation, someone finally found the most spacious path of immortal cultivation, the immortal path. The result of the exploration of countless immortal path cultivators was the birth of the immortal world. It was precisely because it was determined that 9 regions could not bear a more powerful force that the first group of cultivators made up their mind to leave the land that raised them and ascend to a new world, where they started from scratch and completed the transformation from mortals to immortals. If 9 regions could accommodate the realm beyond the immortal realm, then what about the hundreds of thousands of years of hard work of those powerful people with magical abilities? Xiaoyu found it hard to believe, but it did not affect his basic judgment. For this uninvited guest, he waved his hand and a destructive divine wind swept toward Wang Lu. Wherever the divine wind passed, time and space were disintegrated. Even the strong and fierce astral wind above the 9th sky had to retreat. Even senior immortal Xiaoyao found it extremely difficult to resist this divine wind. Therefore, when he saw Xiaoyu make his move, Xiaoyao immediately retreated to the side to avoid being affected by the aftermath. At the same time, he was surprised and uncertain. What was Wang Lu trying to do by jumping out at this time? He was not trapped by the passage between the two worlds. It seemed that he had finally deduced the synchronization rate of the giant divine weapon to the extreme at the last moment, and thus successfully returned to 9 regions. However, how could he be so stupid as to think that he could face the power of the immortal king head-on just because he had the giant soldier god? What did he think an immortal king was? What did he think was the culprit who had single-handedly caused the destruction of all worlds? However, would Wang Lu be so stupid? Could it be that he didn't even have the basic ability to think logically? Could it be that he couldn't see the opponent's strength? Would he come back to the 9 regions after so many hardships just to die? The two diametrically contradictory problems made Xiaoyao hesitate. He didn't know whether he should save Wang Lu, or, before Wang Lu revealed his cards, he should stay away from him. The next moment, Wang Lu collided with the divine wind head-on. His body was torn apart in an instant. His flesh and bones were cut into countless pieces, which were then washed by different rivers of time. Some of the pieces turned into flying ash because of the long time, some were permanently solidified, no longer changing, and some were traced back to their origin and gradually returned to nothingness. However, as soon as this body was destroyed, Wang Lu's voice sounded again. "Of course it's me. Otherwise, who else would be so unromantic to appear between you and your father? Those pigs under you who kneel on the ground and don't even dare to look up?" This time, the immortal king finally put on a dignified look. It was not too surprising that he failed to kill the enemy in one blow. However, what was surprising was that he didn't see the avatar that was killed just now. The divine eyes of the immortal king could see through the falsehood of all worlds. Even in the face of the gods of the Western continent, this pair of divine eyes had never been blinded. And what he saw just now was indeed Wang Lu himself. "Ha ha ha, are you curious why I'm still alive? Strange, why can't a dignified immortal king distinguish between the main body and the avatar?" As he spoke, the second Wang Lu walked out of the void. "If you want to know, come and beg me. Beg me and I will tell you." Before his voice fell, 2 beams of light shot out from the eyes of the immortal king, piercing through the eyebrows and heart of Wang Lu. The next moment, Wang Lu's body was completely destroyed by the supreme spell of the immortal path. However, the voice of Wang Lu still sounded unhindered in the sky. "Is this the way you immortals ask for help? Kill me with your eyes? You..." The immortal king snorted coldly. The sound wave instantly dispersed the astral wind of the 9th sky, making the sky of the Blue River region appear unusually clear. And Wang Lu, who was hiding in the void, was also shaken out. His internal organs turned into mud, and he bled to death. "You idiot! You really don't understand what people say. Since you want to play, then play as you please. Let's see how long you can last when you don't even let go of your own daughter." "Enough!" The immortal king finally stopped. "What do you want to say?" Thus, the 4th Wang Lu came with an ethereal astral wind. "There are a lot of things that I want to say, but let's go back to the first question. Is this your attitude when asking for help?" The immortal king was angry, but he remained silent. Xiaoyao, who was on the side, found it funny. The dignified immortal king was actually played by a young kid. Was it really important what Wang Lu wanted to say? Was it really important why he couldn't die? As long as the target was changed to the Spirit Sword Mountain on the ground, how could Wang Lu still have the possibility to do it? Wang Lu couldn't be killed, but could the other people on the Spirit Sword Mountain not be killed? Moreover, he had already guessed the means that Wang Lu was using now. It was indeed the creativity of a genius, but in essence, it was still an insignificant skill. If the immortal king's divine eyes were not hindered, he should have been able to see it. The truth was very simple. Each of the 4 people killed just now was a real person. None of them were doppelgangers or illusions. Therefore, the immortal king's divine eyes certainly couldn't tell whether they were real or fake. As for how could there be so many Wang Lu in the world? It was better to ask, why couldn't there be so many Wang Lu? He was 100% synchronized with the giant divine weapon, and what was the giant divine weapon? It was an artificial creation. So in other words, Wang Lu was no longer a pure human being. So, as long as there were enough resources, How difficult was it to separate more than one real person? There were nearly 100 inferior versions of the giant divine weapon in the Red Sea underwater workshop alone. And wasn't their non-phase method the best at multi-core combat? There were hundreds of king pill in that woman's body, which had long gone beyond the scope of common sense. As her disciple, Wang Lu had the magical ability of doppelgangers, which was simply reasonable. As for where the resources came from, this was not a problem. Wang Lu had ruled 9 regions for 15 years and had the resources of the whole continent. What could he not do? These things were not difficult to think about. As long as one had a certain understanding of 9 regions, coupled with a level of logical thinking ability, it was easy to speculate the truth. However, at this time, the immortal king seemed to be completely blinded. Compared with him who had just ascended the throne tens of thousands of years ago, it was like the difference between clouds and mud. Perhaps longevity really had endless wonderful tastes, but what was the difference between an immortal who was immersed in the wonderful and a waste? Xueqi was really old and confused. An immortal king who had been isolated in the Palace of Three Purities and rarely appeared for tens of thousands of years really had no value of loyalty. Thinking of this, senior immortal Xiaoyao made another decision in his heart. At this time, the dialogue between Wang Lu and the immortal king continued. Although it was impossible for the immortal king to bow his head and admit defeat, Wang Lu was willing to continue the topic. Your Majesty Immortal King, on behalf of 9 regions, I sincerely suggest to you that everything should end here. Is that okay? End here? All the immortals return to the immortal world, and 9 regions will be closed to the immortal world from now on. No one will ever ascend there to disturb us again. How about it? The immortal king sneered. Wishful thinking. I'm serious. If we continue to fight, it's nothing more than a slap in the face. Your Majesty Immortal King wants to refine 9 regions to prolong the life of the immortal world and yourself. But for us, this is a dead end. Then, we can also die, and we can make you unhappy before we die. The Immortal King sneered, just based on you bastards. We may not be enough, but what if we add the gods of the Western continent? With your immortal eyes, you should be able to see that this continent has been stained with the holy light of the Western continent. Then we can reasonably offer this continent to the gods of the Western continent. For the immortal kings who encounter the same predicament, this must be a gift that cannot be refused. How dare that group of wastes compete with my immortal world? Wang Lu said with a smile, if the immortal world is in a perfect state, the gods of the Western continent who are also in dire straits would certainly not dare to make a move. They haven't even digested their own territory. But now, more than half of the power of the immortal world is restrained by 9 regions. Do you really have the confidence to face the gods of the Western continent? Wang Lu's words immediately made the immortal king even more angry. At this time, Xiaoyao interrupted the dialogue with a smile. Wang Lu, you want to use the power of the Western continent to contain us, but you don't know that the gods of the Western continent don't have the courage to touch the edge of the immortal world. Your Majesty once single-handedly broke into the temple of the gods and seriously injured the immortal king. Now that your Majesty's immortal power is even stronger than before, why would they have the courage to come and take the risk for you? When the immortal king heard this, he took a deep look at Xiaoyao. Of course, these words were nonsense. In the past, there was a war between the immortal world and the gods of the Western continent, and there was also a time when they broke into the temple of the gods. However, the fierceness of that war hurt both sides at the same time. Although the immortal world won, it was a Pyrrhic victory. It was difficult to say whether the gods of the Western continent would really be afraid of the power of the immortal king. However, that was an old thing from tens of thousands of years ago. For the people of 9 regions now, it was completely a fog, and there was no way to judge whether it was true or false. What Xiaoyao said was right. However, in Xiaoyao's view, it didn't matter what he said. Because the point was that he had to try his best to delay this dialogue. Because he had seen that the strongest blow that Wang Lu had been accumulating for a long time was on the verge of breaking out. Chapter 838. Ha ha ha, tens of thousands of years ago, the gods of the Western continent may have been beaten by you, but as long as they are not stupid enough, it is not difficult to judge that you are strong in appearance but weak in reality. You have to pay a heavy price to deal with us, a group of lower realm bastards. What makes you the people of the Pantheon afraid? Golden King is just a defeated dog of the Western continent, but he always embarrassed you immortals in 9 regions. What qualifications do you have to be confident that you can resist the Pantheon that has swallowed the Western continent? In the face of the eloquent argument of senior immortal Xiaoyao, Wang Lu retorted unceremoniously. His tone was rhythmic, which naturally sounded powerful and persuasive. Of course, all this was just acting. Wang Lu didn't care whether the immortal world could face the Pantheon head-on or not. He just took this opportunity to cooperate with Xiaoyao to delay time. Although he didn't understand why Xiaoyao wanted to stand on the opposite side of the immortal world, if there was a condition, why not use it? Xiaoyao was also satisfied with Wang Lu's tactfulness. He laughed and said, "Wang Lu, you're really a frog in a well. The immortal world has indeed shed blood in 9 regions, and our group of good-for-nothing subordinates have indeed added humiliation to the immortal world. However, the strength of the immortal world is not determined by us, a group of handymen, but by His Majesty the Immortal King. As long as His Majesty is still alive, the immortal world will always be unshakable. If you have the idea of benefiting from both sides, that would be too disappointing." However, no one knew what was wrong with this sentence. The immortal King Xia Yu, who was silent on the side, suddenly turned his eyes and looked down at the position of Spirit Sword Mountain. He seemed to have some intention to move. Wang Lu immediately sneered, "Immortal King? Is it this waste who can't kill me even after killing me 4 times?" As a result, before he could finish his sentence, Wang Lu's whole body was shaken into minced meat silently. You know you can't be killed, but you still want to do useless things. This kind of pure emotional behavior will only make people think less of you. Immortal King? Ridiculous thing. Boom. This time, Wang Lu's entire body was set ablaze by a ball of fire that was ignited from within. He turned into a raging fireball and exploded with a loud bang. However, in the embers of the flames, Wang Lu reappeared like a phoenix in nirvana. "Xiaoyao, I'm starting to sympathize with you guys. Working for this kind of trash, you must have suffered a lot, right? If there's a chance in the future, I'll treat you to a drink. You can tell me all about it, of course." Xiaoyao didn't dare to answer. He pretended to be angry and said, "You're courting death." Then, a streak of golden light struck toward him. Wang Lu casually blocked the golden light with a gray metal plate. Even that old guy can't kill me, but you're eager to try? What kind of spirit was this? Do you want to prove that you're better than your father? Nonsense. Xiaoyao seemed to be surging with rage, and countless immortal techniques smashed out like a storm. Most of them were completely different from his handsome and extraordinary bearing, and they were filled with evil intent and malice. They were all undisguised curses and magic techniques. However, such a statement was exactly what the immortal king wanted. Xia Yu seemed to enjoy the loyalty shown by Xiaoyao at this time. He didn't intervene, but just let the two fight in full swing. At this time, Wang Lu's strength was far less than that of the immortal king, but he had the strength of a peak senior immortal. Compared with the illegitimate son of the immortal king, Xiaoyao, he was only slightly inferior. And Xiaoyao was not sure if Wang Lu was deliberately showing weakness. However, it didn't matter what the truth was. What mattered was that by turning the fight into a fight, this play of delaying time could be extended for a long time. Of course, no matter how slow the immortal King Xia Yu was, he would eventually find out the abnormality. As the process of Wang Lu's power accumulation approached completion, the 9 regions under his feet had become more and more obvious. The danger of that aura shook senior immortal Xiaoyao's immortal heart. He thought that he must stay away from it before it broke out. He didn't dare to say whether the immortal King Xia Yu would be seriously injured by this move, but he himself would definitely be seriously injured. At the same time, inside and outside Spirit Sword Mountain, everyone was waiting anxiously. What is His Majesty waiting for? Senior immortal Feng Yun was the most impatient. At this time, he knelt on the ground. Although his body was motionless, his face became more and more anxious. His eyes turned red, and a mass of killing intent was brewing. At this time, a dignified senior immortal was kneeling in the front line of the battlefield under the gaze of countless lower realm bastards. This humiliation was really infuriating. His Majesty wouldn't be bewitched by Xiaoyao again, right? Every time Xiaoyao comes forward, His Majesty does things. Feng Yun, watch your words. Senior immortal Qing Lu interrupted him unceremoniously. Do you want to taste the immortal prison? Senior immortal Feng Yun's momentum suddenly softened a lot. I just think it's strange. Why can't His Majesty wait for us to finish this war? Those bastards have been forced to a dead end, and there's only one last step left. Senior Immortal Qing Lu was silent for a while and said, "So we have no reason to be anxious. Anyway, even if we give them time, they have no chance to make a comeback." That's true. Halfway through the conversation between the two of them through primordial spirit, they suddenly saw that not far away, Senior Immortal Yefeng's face changed. He turned his head incredulously and looked at the vast land outside Spirit Sword Mountain. What the hell is this? The next moment, Senior Immortal Lifeng stood up and turned into a rainbow light that flew straight into the sky. The immortals who were kneeling around were shocked. Before the Immortal King said to rise, who dared to get up and fly so boldly? Even if Senior Immortal Lifeng had a high seniority, the number of people who had been killed by the Immortal King was not small. At the moment when Lifeng got up, above the ninth sky, the two people who were fighting also found him at the same time. In the fierce battle, Wang Lu and Xiao Yao looked at each other, and the inexplicable tacit understanding made them react correctly in the first place. Senior Lifeng, there's no need to rush out to show your loyalty at this time, right? In this battle, I alone am enough. Senior Immortal Xiao Yao said and laughed loudly. The invisible sound wave, which was wrapped in a tangible golden light, spread out one by one. Wang Lu also showed a timely unbearable and distressed posture, as if his weakness had been discovered, and he took advantage of the situation to attack wildly and fell into a disadvantageous position. Of course, Senior Immortal Lifeng himself was baffled and said, "Xiao Yao, you're talking nonsense. Damn it!" Before he could finish his words, Xiao Yao's large-scale sound wave attack had already affected him. If it weren't for his quick reaction, he would have been slightly injured. However, the sound wave did not stop, and he was blocked halfway to the Immortal King. As for speaking loudly or using primordial spirit sound transmission, the power of the sound wave was so powerful that it couldn't be passed. Sensing that the hidden danger in the ground under his feet was getting closer and closer, Senior Immortal Lifeng was burning with anxiety. However, when this posture fell into the eyes of the Immortal King, it had another meaning. Xia Yu seemed to see a foolish person who took advantage of his seniority, disregarded the etiquette of the immortal world, and blindly grabbed the credit. Thus, he glared at him and unceremoniously knocked Lifeng down to the mortal world. The Immortal King Xia Yu showed mercy, but Lifeng still felt that his internal organs were burning, and his whole body fell down uncontrollably. Like a meteorite, he smashed straight into the ground, stirring up dust and soil hundreds of meters high, which was very tragic. Seeing the example of Lifeng, the other senior immortals who were faintly aware of the abnormality were also silent and no longer dared to act rashly. Fortunately, at this time, the Lingjian school did not take advantage of the situation to pursue them. Otherwise, with the panic in the hearts of these immortals at this time, perhaps they would not dare to fight back rashly even if they were attacked. After all, the strength of the cultivators in the lower realm was limited, and now that they were crippled, even if they attacked fiercely, if the immortals defended with all their strength, they would only suffer some minor injuries at most. But once they angered the Immortal King, the consequences would be unimaginable. At this time, the people on Spirit Sword Mountain were not idle. What exactly does Wang Lu want to do? Lu Li paced back and forth in the bamboo room, and the fear in his heart piled up. Feng Yin was silent, but from the frown on his face, it was obvious that he was also restless. However, the awkward atmosphere in the bamboo room did not last long. Not long after. "Senior brother, Wang Lu is back?" Feng He gasped for breath and strode into the bamboo room. Before he arrived, his anxious roar had already resounded through the sky. Feng Yin and Lu Li were so shocked that they jumped up. The two hurriedly used the body freezing technique on Feng He. Immediately, the third elder could not move. "Senior brother? What is this?" As a result, just after they dealt with Feng He, they heard Hua Yun's voice coming from afar. Senior brother, I heard that Wang Lu is back? Why didn't you tell us?" Then, even the people from other sects rushed over. The red-robed elder hurriedly said, "Where is Wang Lu? What should we do now? He must have a way." Feng Yin and Lu Li looked at each other and released Feng He's body freezing technique. "Junior brother, who told you that Wang Lu is back?" Feng He was obviously a little puzzled, but he still answered honestly, "Bai Shixian told me." "Bai Shixian? How did she know?" "She said that she just smelled Wang Lu's scent." This. Feng Yin and Lu Li were dumbfounded. Previously, Wang Lu's immortal method of hiding his tracks was so brilliant that it was beyond their understanding. Even though Feng Yin had the stellar divine eyes, he could not find any trace of Wang Lu before he appeared. What was even more amazing was that at that time, Wang Lu was standing in front of him, but if he closed his eyes, he could not sense his existence at all. Wang Lu apparently had another fortuitous encounter in the passage between the two worlds, and his strength had advanced by leaps and bounds, but he could not hide it from Bai Shixian. How could that little guy's sense of smell be so keen? Unfortunately, there was no time to investigate when Bai Shixian became so powerful. The news of Wang Lu's return had spread on Spirit Sword Mountain, so it was obvious that the immortals would also know about it. Huh? Just now, the people on Spirit Sword Mountain said that Wang Lu is back? Could it be that the person fighting up there is Wang Lu? That's impossible. How did he come back? I don't dare to look up, so I can't be sure. It doesn't matter, I have Wang Lu's blood here, so I can lock his position. But, why are there so many Wang Lu's? Each of them looks real, and most of them are distributed in different places in 9 regions. Wait a minute. Send me his position. If you connect these points into a line. Damn it, he wants to use 9 regions to set up an array. No, we must inform His Majesty the Immortal King immediately. This matter cannot be delayed. Of course, with the eyes and ears of the Immortal King, there was no need for his subordinates to inform him. Their dialogue would naturally flow into his mind. It turned out that there were many Wang Lu's, and most of them were distributed in different places in 9 regions, jointly presiding over a huge array across 9 regions. What Wang Lu wanted to do was already clear. At this moment, the Immortal King finally awakened a little bit of clarity. He dropped his terrifying right hand and smashed it down on Spirit Sword Mountain. The nodes of the great array laid by Wang Lu were very scattered, but there was only one core, and there could only be one. The face of Wang Lu, who was fighting with Xiao Yao, changed. At this time, his momentum had not yet been completed, and the most critical blow could not be sent out. If the Spirit Sword Mountain was scattered by the Immortal King's palm, then everything would be over. And now, he was simply unable to stop the blow of the Immortal King. Fortunately, he was not alone now. Wang Wu. Ha ha ha, here it comes. In an instant, before the palm of the Immortal King landed, a woman in snow-white clothes suddenly appeared in mid-air. She pointed a straight emerald-green bamboo sword in her hand straight to the sky and collided with the giant palm head-on. Chapter 839. The power of the Immortal King was like a prison or a sea. When he tore the space apart and descended to 9 regions, the whole continent trembled. When his full-strength palm descended on Spirit Sword Mountain, it was enough to shatter this immortal mountain that had been passed down for thousands of years, along with all the people on the mountain. Therefore, the white shadow that suddenly appeared under the giant palm seemed so thin and fragile, as if the aftermath of the giant palm could crush her to pieces. When Wang Wu raised her emerald-green bamboo sword and pointed it to the sky like Spirit Sword Mountain, all the people who paid attention to this scene exclaimed from the bottom of their hearts. Wang Wu, what are you doing? Wang Wu, are you crazy? However, the next moment, these cries were swept away by a sound wave that shocked 9 regions. The collision between Wang Wu and the Immortal King aroused a visible milky white wave, which instantly spread hundreds of miles, thousands of miles, and even thousands of miles away. A moment later, the gust of wind that descended from the sky swept the earth. The vegetation was dormant, the rocks shook, and countless birds and beasts were blown into the sky by the hurricane in panic. In the sky, the few remaining clouds were completely swept away, revealing a dazzling ray of sunlight. Such a stormy wave was just the aftermath of the collision, so how tragic would the center of the collision be? In addition to the horror in people's hearts, they were even more worried about the situation of Wang Wu. Because no matter how they calculated, under that palm, there was no possibility for her to survive. Even if she was an outside path cultivator, even if the number of king pill in her body was hundreds at its peak, but in front of the Immortal King, what was the point of these insignificant skills? However, sometimes common sense and logic were destined to be broken. After the sound wave swept across the land of Blue River region, there was silence. In the silence, a woman's high-pitched laughter was particularly harsh. Ha 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 ha, Xia Yu, haven't you eaten? Your palm is so soft and weak, your wife must be flat-chested, right? Wang Wu, it was Wang Wu. Only she could still speak dirty in the face of the Immortal King Xia Yu and the life and death crisis of 9 regions. At the same time, Only she could survive the full-strength palm of the immortal king. In the sky, Xueqi revealed an unprecedented seriousness. His immortal eyes were like swords, piercing towards the ants below. A mere ant from the lower realms was actually able to withstand the all-out attack of a celestial king? Even if Xiao Yao were to block that palm attack just now, he would be severely injured and on the verge of death. However, not only did Wang Wu not die, she was also unharmed. Only the bamboo in her hand was smashed into pieces. She casually plucked at the air and took out a green bamboo. Her mana condensed into a sword, and the sword light was boundless. Under the serious gaze of the immortal king, Wang Wu was obviously a little uncomfortable. She couldn't help but sway, but then she reached out to pull her clothes and said in a very annoying tone, I was just telling a dirty joke, and you actually started to look at me like I'm an adulterer? I heard that you wouldn't even let go of your own daughter. You must be a sex addict, right? For the record, I already have someone I like. Humph, you dare to show off your insignificant skills. Let's see how you block it this time. The immortal king was not moved by Wang Wu's words, and the second palm fell from the sky. This time, the giant palm that fell from the sky was 10 times bigger than the previous one. Like a dark cloud, it blotted out the sky and the sun. Wang Wu's eyebrows were dignified, and she also gave up the plan to continue to tease the immortal king. She threw away the emerald green bamboo sword and replaced it with a long bone sword with jagged joints. This sword was tempered by her own non-phase sword bone. In this world, and even in the myriad of worlds, it was the most adaptable divine weapon to her non-phase method. Holding this sword, she had the confidence to prop up an invincible sword defense, even in the face of the wrath of the immortal king. The next moment, a white golden sword defense light lit up in the air. Wang Wu still didn't evade, and directly stabbed the giant palm of the immortal king with her non-phase sword. This time, the collision was silent. The giant palm of the immortal king caved in from the center, which was blocked by the non-phase sword defense propped up by Wang Wu, and could no longer move forward. However, the surrounding part quickly bypassed the sword defense. It continued to go down. The immortal king just found out that he couldn't kill Wang Wu with one palm, but he didn't care at all, because he didn't need to care about what means Wang Wu relied on to survive. His goal was Spirit Sword Mountain. As long as Spirit Sword Mountain was destroyed, whether it was Wang Wu or Wang Lu, the clown, they would all be beaten back to their original form. At this time, Wang Wu, who was wrapped by the palm of the immortal king, was shocked and angry at the same time. She said, "What the hell? Didn't you say that Xiaoyu is mentally retarded? How could he use this kind of flexible means?" In the sky, Wang Lu also angrily replied, "Even if he's mentally retarded, he's still a mentally retarded immortal king. His fighting instinct has long been engraved in his body. Do you expect him to attack you by throwing feces at you like a chimpanzee?" F***CK. The next moment, Wang Wu could no longer hold back any of her cards. The white bone sword in her hand swept in a circle, and the non-phase sword defense was broken. However, this break was like a barrel of gunpowder igniting, which erupted with earth-shattering power. The giant palm of the immortal king was actually shattered by this internal explosion. It lost its shape in mid-air and turned into countless discrete energy pieces that flew in all directions. It was just that. Occasionally, a few tiny pieces of energy fell to the ground, which would cause landslides and cracks. Even if it was only 1/10,000th or 100,000th of the power of the immortal king, it was not something that this continent could bear. And to be able to shatter the palm of the immortal king with all his strength. How high was the strength of Wang Wu? At this moment, all over 9 regions, countless eyes were focused on Wang Wu, and then people fell into a deeper shock. After bursting out with all her strength, Wang Wu could no longer hide her strength. The woman's whole body was lit up with golden, sand-like light. The immortals had amazing eyesight and soon found that each of them was the luster of the king pill. And in Wang Wu's body, there were a total of 3,000 such light sources. 3,000 king pills were neatly in Wang Wu's body. How is this possible? At this moment, even senior immortal Xiao Yao fell into extreme disbelief. 3,000 king pills existed in one person's body? There was no such truth in all the worlds. How was this possible? How did she coordinate the operation of these 3,000 king pills at the same time? Even if her primordial spirit was extremely tyrannical and could coordinate the output of 3,000 king pills at the same time, the king pill was not an ordinary condensation of magical power, but carried the original law of the cultivator's immortal path. It was not easy for a cultivator to have 2 or 3 kinds of laws at the same time. 3,000 laws. This was the power of heaven and earth. And if she forcibly incorporated the magical power of heaven and earth into her body, wouldn't her body explode and die? Impossible, it was absolutely impossible. Even the immortals in the immortal world could not store so many king pills in their body. Even if the power of the immortal was completely stronger than the sum of thousands of king pills, it was still impossible to do things that couldn't be done. However, it was meaningless to say more now. Wang Wu had already shown everyone her 3,000 king pills and her non-phase sword defense, which was enough to resist the palm of the immortal king. Next, it was enough for them to face up to and accept this reality. Your Majesty, please let us make our move. Outside Spirit Sword Mountain, the immortals who had been kneeling for a long time began to boldly raise their heads to fight. The leader was, of course, Feng Yun. Humph. The immortal king gave a cold snort and declined to comment. But for those who were familiar with him, this was enough. Senior Immortal Feng Yun beamed with joy and said, "Go, kill all these lowly people." Wang Wu had blocked the palm of the immortal king twice, so she was obviously the target of the immortal king himself. If others didn't want to die, they shouldn't get involved. At this time, what they could do was to kill all the lowly people on Spirit Sword Mountain when the immortal king tried his best to destroy Wang Wu. However, who do you want to kill? A young and handsome face suddenly appeared in front of Senior Immortal Feng Yun. And before Feng Yun could exclaim the 2 words Wang Lu, a heavy fist hit his chin from the bottom up. Senior Immortal Feng Yun only felt an irresistible force coming from his chin. He involuntarily closed his mouth, and half of his tongue was broken on the spot. Then there were 2 rows of tightly clenched immortal teeth and the lower jaw of the immortal. His whole body flew high into the sky in an instant. Overconfident waste. Next. With a shout, Wang Lu's figure appeared like a ghost in front of Senior Immortal Qing Lu, who was dozens of miles away. For this female Senior Immortal, he didn't have the slightest bit of tenderness for the fairer sex in his eyes. Previously, when they besieged Spirit Sword Mountain, too many 9 regions cultivators died in her hands. In the eyes of Wang Lu, she was no longer worthy of being a human. Senior Immortal Qing Liu's experience was slightly better than Feng Yun's. With Feng Yun's example, she was more or less prepared and set up her immortal method in advance. However, Wang Lu's punch was unstoppable. It easily penetrated the layers of immortal method that she set up, and then imprinted on her pink chin. Senior Immortal Qing Lu flew straight into the sky with a string of mournful blood. A dignified Senior Immortal actually had no ability to resist. After Qing Lu, more immortals and Senior Immortals were sent to the sky by Wang Lu's punches. In the sky, the fight between the Immortal King and Wang Wu had also reached the final juncture. Under Xia Yu's all-out attack, more than half of the 3,000 king pill was damaged in an instant, and the bone sword also lost 1/3 of its length. Wang Wu's appearance was miserable, and she was no longer as elegant as she was a moment ago. The 3,000 king pill was the supreme achievement of the outside path that shook the world, but in front of the immortal king, it was still vulnerable. On the other hand, after several attacks, Xia Yu regained his sanity. Therefore, his attacks became more tricky and subtle, making it impossible to guard against. And this is the end. With a roar, Xia Yu grabbed Wang Wu with his immortal giant hand, and her non-phase sword defense was crushed by his palm, which immediately caused her to spurt out a mouthful of blood. And to be able to block my 10 moves, you are indeed unexpected. However, you can vanish into thin air now. With that, Xia Yu coldly stretched out his other hand and pressed Wang Wu's head. As long as both palms exerted force at the same time, her whole body could be twisted and broken to death. Xia Yu, I advise you to let go of her. At the critical moment, Wang Lu's figure appeared in mid-air. To be able to break the 3,000 king pills non-phase sword technique, as a pervert, you are really powerful. However, you'd better look down at the world under your feet. Xia Yu frowned slightly, and then turned his gaze to the world below. In the immortal king's heart, a trace of uncontrollable fear welled up. Chapter 840. The immortal king stood high in the sky, overlooking the 9 regions, and had a panoramic view of the vast land. This continent, which had given birth to countless miracles, had gone through millions of years of vicissitudes, from the primordial age to the desolation age, from the desolation age to the glory age, and then to the decline age. Now it seemed to have entered its aging period. So much so that the children of 9 regions dared to come here unscrupulously and use the 9 regions as a consumable. However now, in Xiaoyu's eyes, the 9 regions seemed to have come alive again. From its twilight years, it became a steady man in his prime, and then evolved from a man in his prime to an active young man. Then, the entire 9 regions seemed to be ignited by the fire of karma and burned. An energy that was enough to shock all the world surged in the earth. Just the aftermath that leaked from the cracks was enough to frighten people. It was hard to imagine what kind of upheaval was brewing in the depths of the earth. Do you like it? This is my gift to you. Wang Lu's indifferent smile appeared in front of Xiaoyu. Your Majesty the Immortal King, you are indeed very powerful. So powerful that even if we, the lower realm bastards, try our best, we can't hurt a single hair of yours. Moreover, a casual blow from you would require us to risk our lives to resist it. However, after all, we have a strong backer. Xiaoyu snorted coldly. Based on this decayed 9 regions? Yes, the 9 regions is indeed decayed. Most of its essence has been absorbed by its children in the past million years. From the innate almighty in the primordial age, to the ancestor witch in the desolation age, and then to the immortals in the dream age when the immortal path flourished, countless tyrannical creatures were born here, and then they ascended and left with the gifts of the 9 regions. In our generation, the immortal path has withered. Even if the future generations are united, the surrounding spiritual energy and even the laws of the great path have declined. In fact, even without the extraction of the immortal world, the decline of the 9 regions is inevitable. After a pause, Wang Lu said, however, even if it has declined, this is still the 9 regions, the greatest and most remarkable place in all worlds, the starting point of all miracles. Your Majesty the Immortal King, if the immortal world still exists, perhaps its power would be thousands of times stronger than that of the 9 regions. However, the current immortal world is just a ruin drifting in the endless void. What qualifications do you have to look down on the 9 regions? Ridiculous! Xiaoyu fiercely raised his hand. At the same time, in the distant southern heaven region, the inverse Gisaurus pillar, which had been standing for a long time, gently trembled and released a terrifying halo of destruction. Soon, it crossed the border of the southern heaven region and spread to the surrounding regions. In the sky, more tunnels were opened, and 8 brand new inverse Gisaurus pillars revealed their hideous heads. When I destroy your 9 regions, let's see what else you can use to be rampant. When Xiaoyu spoke, he did not waste any more energy to kill the Wang Lu in front of him. Although this was also a real body, he also saw that there were more real bodies of Wang Lu scattered all over the 9 states, so it was meaningless to kill any one of them. He concentrated all his power on opening the passage. At this time, the space barrier of 9 regions was weakened to the extreme. Therefore, he could forcibly open multiple passages with the magical power of the Immortal King and pull down the reverse Gisaurus pillar. The inverse Gisaurus pillar was cast from the strange creature, Inverse Gisaurus, which was accidentally discovered by the immortal world during its campaign in the 10,000 worlds. It and Gisaurus pillar were the 2 sides of yin and yang. The Gisaurus pillar contained a world in its body, which could create something out of nothing. However, the inverse Gisaurus pillar turned something into nothing and had the most powerful power of destruction in the 10,000 worlds. When the immortal world conquered the inverse Gisaurus pillar, it paid an extremely tragic price. The reward was 33 inverse Gisaurus pillars, each of which had the power to destroy the world, and most of them were used in the campaign in the 10,000 worlds. Now there were still 9 of them, all of which had been drawn by Xiaoyu and cast the shadow of destruction on 9 regions. At this moment, the people of 9 regions looked up at the suddenly opened passage between the 2 worlds and the dark inverse Gisaurus pillar, and despair rose in their hearts. One inverse Gisaurus pillar had destroyed the entire southern heaven region. If the remaining 8 fell together. As for those immortals who were beaten into the astral wind level by Wang Lu, they all showed a look of surprise. His Majesty the Immortal King was indeed as mighty as the sea. He could actually break the space barrier and draw the inverse Gisaurus pillar. It must be known that it took them a lot of effort to open the passage in 9 regions. Only Wang Lu sneered at this and said, Xiaoyu, you really should wake up. Next, please enjoy the anger of the 9 regions. Non-phase celestial cannon. The next moment, 8 auroras burst out from the ground of the 8 regions. Each aurora was hundreds of miles thick, and they rushed to the sky with the endless anger of the 9 regions. They rushed to the inverse Gisaurus pillar that had just arrived in this world. These divine tools, which once made the people of 9 regions helpless and made them pay a heavy price, could not even hold on for a moment and were destroyed by the impact of the aurora. The passage between the two worlds that Xueqi forcibly opened with the power of the immortal king was also burned by the anger of the earth. In an instant, Xueqi suffered a strong backlash. His immortal body trembled violently, and the light of the immortal king that enveloped him and blocked the sight of others began to fade, gradually revealing his true face. Oh, I can't believe that the real face of the immortal king Xueqi, the leader of all worlds, is actually like this. It was Wang Lu again. He recklessly got close to the immortal king and then said in a particularly provocative tone, "I guess even those people in the pantheon can't imagine that the dignified Xueqi is actually a balding old man, right?" This time, Xueqi unceremoniously separated Wang Lu's flesh and bones. Unfortunately, soon a new Wang Lu appeared beside him. "It's no use getting angry out of shame. To be honest, I didn't expect you to be so stupid as to show your trump card in advance. Your Majesty, your only chance is to destroy the Spirit Sword Mountain before my 9 regions great array is completely completed. Unfortunately, you have wasted too much time on Wang Wu. Now that my great array has been completed, I can fire another 100 non-phase celestial cannons at any time. Your Majesty, let me ask you one last time, do you want to stop here?" Wang Lu's expression was extremely serious, which even gave people a faint feeling that the Wang Lu who appeared in front of the immortal king at this time was more real than any other. "Your Majesty, I can tell you frankly that this non-phase celestial cannon consumes the lifespan of the 9 regions, which is not much. I used the lives of hundreds of millions of creatures in 9 regions to awaken the blood of the 9 regions, so that its blood boiled again in its twilight years. However, this special method is weak, and we won't have a second chance to awaken the power of the 9 regions. So, today, either I ask your Majesty to return to the immortal world permanently and look for new prey in the myriad worlds, or we have to break up and let all of you stay here forever." Wang Lu said with a ferocious look on his face. "Hee, Senior Immortal King, I wonder if these precious bodies can be turned into nourishment so that 9 regions can live longer." Wishful thinking. Xueqi's body was once again ignited with brilliant light. The light that belonged to the immortal king obscured everyone's sight, and the immortal technique that belonged to the immortal king was completed in an instant. "Your Majesty, you can't use force." No one knew when, but Senior Immortal Lifeong came to Xueqi's side. "Your Majesty, why don't we temporarily return to the immortal world? This 9 regions will burn its blood, and it won't last long. As long as its blood turns cold, we can come back at any time." Xueqi's expression changed slightly, as if he was moved. "Your Majesty, we must not retreat at this time." Senior Immortal Feng Yun also appeared in front of the immortal king with a vague voice. "If we retreat, they will definitely shoot the sky-blasting cannon into the immortal world along the passage between the 2 worlds and catch us all in one fell swoop. We must kill them here and now." Xueqi hesitated again. He was indeed too old, and his mind was easy to fall into ignorance. The people around him had different opinions, so it was difficult for him to make a decision. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao sneered and said, "Continue to fight, find more people to fight, and finally decide by voting. It just so happens that everyone is gathered together, waiting for Wang Lu to catch them all in one fell swoop with a large sky-blasting cannon. Xueqi, look at yourself now, struggling at death's door, showing your ugly side. What's the point of living like this? Think about you when you were young. Do you really deserve to be called Xueqi?" When Xueqi heard this, his eyes suddenly lit up, and he once again swept across the burning 9 regions under his feet. In an instant, he gave up all hesitation and swooped down like lightning. At this time, it was as if he had returned to his prime, when he led the group of immortals to conquer the world and sweep everything. Wang Lu's 9 regions burning blood great array was indeed powerful, but 9 regions was too old and decayed after all. Without the control of some people, it was impossible to fire the non-phase celestial cannon. Therefore, the hesitation just now was completely unnecessary. He didn't need to consider whether he could defeat 9 regions by himself. He just needed to kill the kid who got in the way. And if the immortal king seriously wanted to kill someone, there was no one he couldn't kill. Even if Wang Lu divided himself into 10,000 real bodies and hid them in different hidden places, he still couldn't hide from the eyes of the immortal king. How troublesome could it be to kill 10,000 ants? At this time, feeling the awe-inspiring killing intent of the immortal king Wang Lu, who was scattered all over 9 regions, showed surprise at the same time. The seriously injured Wang Wu also struggled to get up and once again raised the bone sword, which was only 2 feet long, as if she wanted to use Wang Lu to resist the attack of the Immortal King. However, before Wang Wu's non-phase sword defense was opened, the Immortal King in the air disappeared. The next moment, in various places of 9 regions, countless Wang Lu were killed by the Immortal King. In the end, it was Wang Lu, who stayed in the 9th sky, who issued a request to the Immortal King to surrender. He was only surprised for a moment, and then his throat was grabbed by the Immortal King with one hand. Now, what qualifications do you have to talk to me about conditions? With that, Xueqi mercilessly pinched the head of Wang Lu. Then, he looked down at his feet with a sneer, looking forward to the burning blood great array in 9 regions becoming chaotic and disorderly, and then the whole land would die in spontaneous combustion. However, Xueqi's smile gradually converged and solidified. He had just killed all the Wang Lu in 9 regions and was sure that Wang Lu had already died without a burial place. Then why? 9 regions burning blood great array was still running? Unfortunately, before he could think more about it, an unprecedented aurora burst out from the savage land of Blue River region. Chapter 841. The war between 9 regions and the immortal world was, in the final analysis, a war for time. Whichever side could win the time would win the final victory. If the immortal world came to 9 regions a few hundred years later, then Wang Lu could integrate all the forces of 9 regions and nip the invasion of the immortal world in the bud. Of course, if the immortal world could not open the passage between the 2 worlds in a few hundred years, it would also decline. In this war for time, the immortal world used its huge advantage in strength to laugh at the end. In the end, the passage between the 2 worlds was opened ahead of schedule. Many of Wang Lu's plans for 9 regions came to an abrupt end, and he had to hastily respond to the war. At the beginning of the war, despite the caution of the immortal world, 9 regions was still in a difficult situation. Even he himself was sealed into the passage between the 2 worlds by Yen Luo, which could be described as a crushing defeat. Later, the immortal world invaded on a large scale, and 9 regions retreated in defeat. At this time, whether Wang Lu could return to the passage between the 2 worlds in time became the key to the war. And in this game, in the vague act of senior immortal Xiao Yao, the immortal world lost a move, and finally, Wang Lu returned to 9 regions at the last moment. Later, the abnormal behavior of senior immortal Xiao Yao was exposed, and the immortal king came in person at the expense of his lifespan. Thus, 9 regions immediately faced an arduous test. Whether Wang Lu could use the last move that he had laid out in the past before the immortal king destroyed everything became the key to the victory or defeat. This time, relying on Wang Wu's 3000 king pill, 9 regions once again won. Although most of it relied on the cooperation of senior immortal Xiao Yao, and although Wang Wu was seriously injured, Wang Lu used this precious time to sacrifice hundreds of millions of creatures, launched the 9 regions burning blood, and ignited the anger of 9 regions. Then, this flame was about to sweep everything. With Wang Lu's own sacrifice, the light of the non-phase celestial cannon went straight to the immortal king. In an instant, the 9th sky turned into a sea of light, and the immortal king and everything around him were swallowed up. It's done! On Spirit Sword Mountain, the cultivators who witnessed this scene could not help but cheer. Although they did not understand the principle of the burning blood of the 9 regions, although they had no way to measure the power of the non-phase celestial cannon, but, after seeing the light, they realized that no one could survive the bombardment of the non-phase celestial cannon. The anger of 9 regions erupted, which tore apart the crystal wall that wrapped the continent and directly connected 9 regions and the endless void. The place where the immortal king once stood had been covered by countless void vortexes. However, before the surprise in their hearts could brew, they heard a cold snort. The voice of the immortal king sounded from the void and resounded throughout the 9 regions. What a cunning bastard! You're actually hiding here. In the next moment, people seemed to see a flash of lightning in the distant sky. The lightning streaked across the sky, revealing an ugly scar. The immortal King Xiaoyu held up the upper and lower ends of the scar with one hand, which prevented the space from healing itself. His other hand pinched a person, returning the clone to 9 regions, but the real body has always been hiding in the precarious passage between the 2 realms. Bastard, you're really good at playing hide and seek. At this time, Xiaoyu had long lost the sacred light of the immortal king and revealed his true body. Compared with the balding old man that Wang Lu saw before, Xiaoyu looked much younger. His sword-like eyebrows reached his temples, and his black hair was as black as ink. He was a romantic and elegant youth, and between his eyebrows, there was indeed 50 to 60% similarity to senior immortal Xiaoyao. However, at the same time, he was also in a much more difficult situation. More than half of his luxurious clothes, which contained countless magical abilities, were burned. His flawless immortal body was badly mutilated and scorched black, and his handsome temperament was completely destroyed. After experiencing the bombardment of the non-phase celestial cannon, the immortal king was finally injured. However, the injury stimulated his strength and temporarily restored his youth. How terrifying was the immortal king in his youth! He led the immortals in the immortal world, fought in the 10,000 worlds, and wiped out one incredibly tyrannical world after another. Even the notorious Burning Legion was permanently frozen by him. Whether it was wisdom or strength, Xiaoyu could be regarded as the head of the 10,000 worlds. Even immortal Qin and great ancestor Dusheng, who had achieved supreme glory in 9 regions, had to bow down to Xiaoyu after they ascended to the immortal world. The king of the immortal world, the king of the 10,000 worlds, this was the peak of Xiaoyu. Even if it was only for a short moment, he could use his supreme magical ability to avoid the non-phase celestial cannon, and at the same time, break the puzzle that Wang Lu deliberately set up, and penetrate the endless void to find his real body in the passage between the two realms. Unfortunately, the game time is over. Xiaoyu pinched Wang Lu, and his voice was slightly regretful. This young man was really a rare genius in his long life. First of all, he had the void spirit root. This was the supreme gift of the 9 regions to the immortal path. Since the primordial age, the number of people who had the void spirit root was no more than 3 digits, and all of them were earth-shaking mighty figures. Even Xiaoyu himself was once the owner of the void spirit root. In a sense, Wang Lu was like his bloodline inheritance. In addition, Wang Lu was one of the few powerful enemies that could pose a real threat to Xiaoyu since he reached the immortal king realm. That non-phase celestial blast cannon just now allowed his immortal eyes to see his own death in an instant. Before that, even in the face of the Burning Legion and the Iron Man army, the immortal king had always been able to deal with them with ease. Unexpectedly, after 100,000 years of vicissitudes, he almost capsized in a declining and withered 9 regions. Thinking of this, Xiaoyu suddenly couldn't bear to kill him. In his youth, Xiaoyu was a powerful and heroic king. At that time, he didn't have to panic about the end of his lifespan, and his mind was not distorted by his obsession with longevity. In the eyes of everyone, Xiaoyu was a hero worthy of admiration. He fought in 10,000 worlds, but not for killing and destruction, but for the implementation of the immortal path. In the process, no one knew how many defeated generals were subdued by his spirit, and he also let go of the former enmity and turned the enemy into a friend. The so-called servant soldiers around the immortal world army were, in the beginning, a group of volunteers who were willing to follow Xiaoyu. If it was Xiaoyu at that time, even if he was almost killed by the enemy, he would only admire the opponent's ingenious design afterwards. As for Wang Lu, who used extremely limited conditions to complete the non-phase celestial cannon, he valued him even more. Wang Lu, do you want to follow me? Wang Lu's eyes showed a trace of surprise. Xiaoyu said, "You're very powerful. It can even be said that you're unprecedentedly powerful. If you follow me, you can have a better future. This continent of Jojo is too narrow for you." Wang Lu said with a smile, 9 regions is narrow? Is the immortal world, which is about to be destroyed, vast? Xiaoyu was silent for a moment and then said, "I have found a way to save the immortal world. If you are willing to cooperate with me, the immortal world will be able to restore its glory." Wang Lu said, "Refine 9 regions to make up for the deficit of the immortal world? I really can't see what a long-term solution this is." Xiaoyu snorted and said, "Of course, this is not a long-term solution. But with the power of 9 regions, I can prolong the existence of the immortal world, and then look for a new world outside the 3,000 worlds." Wang Lu's eyes moved and said, "There is a new world outside the 3,000 worlds?" "Of course there is. Just like the 9 regions contains 9 regions, and there is a space crystal wall outside. Our 3,000 great worlds are also wrapped in a shell, and this shell is called the Wall of Worlds. As early as the primordial age, there were powerful ancestors who tried to break through the Wall of Worlds." Wang Lu asked, "Has anyone succeeded?" "I don't know." Xiaoyu said, "I think there are, because many powerful ancestors eventually disappeared, and even their remains were not left. I don't think breaking through the wall of worlds will make people die a horrible death. They must have entered a new world. In fact, I have tried to explore the place outside the wall of worlds, and once made amazing progress. Unfortunately, at that time, I was in a fierce battle with the Burning Legion, so I didn't have enough time to explore deeply. Then what happened after the Burning Legion was destroyed? Xiaoyu said indifferently. After that, I began to think about the problem of longevity. Wang Lu sighed inwardly. This Burning Legion was indeed the scourge of the myriad worlds. Without them, Xiaoyu would have gone deep into the wall of worlds and never returned. How could there be the collapse of the myriad worlds and the decline of the immortal world? Not to mention the damned crisis of the fallen immortal. This time when I refine the 9 regions, I will drive the immortal world to attack the wall of worlds. Xiaoyu said, I can't take a lot of people with me. What's more, exploring the wall of worlds is full of dangers, and humble creatures have no chance to survive. But you, I think you have the value of following me. With that, Xiaoyu's body suddenly shook slightly, and a thin wrinkle appeared on his smooth forehead. A few more silver lines appeared in his long black hair, and his hairline was pushed back a lot. And his voice was no longer clear and hearty. Wang Lu, you don't have much time, so cherish this opportunity. Wang Lu, of course, knew the importance of this opportunity. Xiaoyu's temperament changed greatly because of his brief return to his soul. When he returned to his old age, it was impossible for him to put forward such a condition. As for the new world outside the wall of worlds that Xiaoyu mentioned, he was indeed very interested. After a short silence, Wang Lu made a decision in his heart. He didn't speak, just raised his right hand with difficulty, and then slowly and resolutely raised his middle finger to Xiaoyu. A few more strands of silver lines suddenly appeared on Xiaoyu's head, and his anger instantly burst out. You don't know what's good for you. Wang Lu smiled bitterly and said, Don't know what's good for me? Do you think I'm as stupid as those idiots under your command? You look like an unparalleled hero now, but how much younger can you be? A cup of tea? A meal? When you get old and your mind is distorted, how much is the original promise worth? Do you think I have the value of following you? Is Xia Xiaohe worthless? Did you give birth to your daughter in order to prolong your life? Xiaoyu, if you want to kill me, then kill me. Even if I die here, I will never become your nourishment. Very well, then you can die. The next moment, Xiaoyu's hair turned silver, and he unceremoniously clenched his hand. Chapter 842. Looking at the handful of fine sand in his hand, the immortal King Xiaoyu suddenly felt a bit melancholy. Another talented young man had died. Once upon a time, such 2 young men lost their lives in his hands and turned into grey fine sand. Those 2 young people, like Wang Lu, had a promising future. They were brimming with talent, and their domineering, imposing manner was even stronger than Wang Lu's. They were rare geniuses in the myriad worlds. Unfortunately, compared with their amazing talent, Xiaoyu needed the vitality in their bodies more. Before the 2 of them ascended, they were the overlords of 9 regions. One was named Shi Huang, and the other was called De Sheng. To this day, Xiaoyu could no longer remember the faces of the 2 of them. Only their names remained in his memory. Since when did I stop admiring these geniuses of the new generation? At this time, although Xiaoyu had a head full of silver hair, there was still a bit of youthful vigor in his eyes. Therefore, there was a bit of emotion in his heart that was impossible to have when he was old. He still remembered that a long, long time ago, he was able to praise the new generation of geniuses. At that time, there were 2 rare geniuses in the immortal world. Xiaoyu had high hopes for them. He even agreed with them that after his fall, the throne of the immortal king would be inherited by the 2 of them. Of course, there was only one throne. Therefore, the 2 also agreed that when Xiaoyu fell, one of them would be the king, and the other would enter the wall of worlds and become the pioneer of the immortal world. Unfortunately, these 2 young men did not wait for Xiaoyu's fall. Because compared to inheritance, Xiaoyu finally chose immortality. That was probably in the first full-scale war between the immortal world and the pantheon of the western continent. In the fierce battle between the pantheon of gods, the 2 of them got a little bit of each other's memory, and then that memory changed their temperament at the same time. Xiaoyu, who once looked down on life and death, finally began to pursue immortality. For the sake of immortality, Xiaoyu was unscrupulous. Even though the side effects of immortality were becoming more and more obvious, causing the wise and brilliant immortal king to become slow and numb. Xiaoyu's obsession with immortality only grew with each passing day. He had never regretted anything he had done. Even if he had personally devoured his beloved wife of many years, even if he had killed his children one by one in front of their terrified gazes, even if he had turned his most beloved daughter, Xiaoyuha, into a quasi-puppet that he could pluck at any time. For the sake of longevity, Xiaoyu could give up everything. Until today, when he regained his youth in an instant, he suddenly examined his past from a different perspective. Xiaoyu, when did you become like this? If you saw this from your younger self, I'm afraid you would have immediately killed him. Xiaoyu was silent for a moment. More marks of vicissitudes gradually appeared on his face, and the melancholy in his heart also gradually faded away. No, what I'm doing now is correct. Only immortality is the true path to liberation. Even if it's not for myself or for the sake of the vast thousand domains, I have to live on as long as possible. Because only I can break through the wall of realms and find a glimmer of hope for this declining world. The vast thousand domains has declined. Whether it is the place under the jurisdiction of the immortal world or the territory of the western continent gods, they are all rapidly declining. This is the supreme law of the vast thousand domains. Even the immortal king and god king cannot disobey it. Therefore, since the primitive age, so many people have chosen to go deep into the wall of realms. However, the predecessors have gone, and the future generations have been unable to continue. In a declining world, it is easier said than done to reach the height of the predecessors. Even if it is me, wanting to be comparable to the sages of the primitive age in my lifetime is also a pipe dream. Therefore, only immortality, with a longer lifespan than the sages to accumulate cultivation, can it be possible to open the wall of realms and bring vitality to this vast thousand domains. Therefore, I have not done anything wrong. Even if it leads to the destruction of the myriad worlds, I am the lord of this myriad worlds, the owner and heir of this vast thousand domains. As long as I am still alive, this world will never die. As long as I can live forever. In Xiaoyu's heart, these soliloquies constantly emerged. His body also became older, and his eyes became cloudy. However, the will of the immortal king became more firm. Letting go of the fine sand in his hand, Xiaoyu turned his eyes downward. After experiencing the full power of the non-phase celestial cannon just now, the raging 9 regions finally began to converge. Although there were still some residual flames, they were not worth mentioning. After the death of Wang Lu, the 9 regions' burning blood great array naturally collapsed and no longer posed a threat. As for the spirit sword mountain in the core of the great array, with just one palm it could be crushed to pieces. This time, even if the 3000 king pill came, it would be of no use. The overall situation was settled. The immortal world finally won. At this time, there was a roar beside Xiaoyu. Your Majesty is indeed invincible. Congratulations on your victory, Your Majesty. The immortal king is invincible in all realms, and the lower realms' lowly bastards are annihilated. Xiaoyu could not help but turn his eyes and saw that Feng Yun, Qing Lu, Lai Feng, and even the other senior immortals who guarded the southern heaven region had gathered together. Several of them were shouting loudly. Their voices were fanatical, but there was some fear in their eyes. No wonder they were terrified. The one who should have guarded the southern heaven region appeared here. According to the rules of the immortal world, it was a felony to leave one's post without permission. It must be because the power of the non-phase celestial cannon just now was so strong that these immortals could not help but worry. After all, once the immortal king died, the consequences would be unimaginable. It was just that this kind of worry was undoubtedly a distrust of the immortal king. The old Xiaoyu no longer understood and tolerated. These newly arrived immortals waved the flag and shouted for Xiaoyu in fear and trepidation, but they were just struggling to protect themselves. Xiaoyu, look around you. What kind of people are surrounding you? Are you happy to be surrounded by these jumping clowns? Senior immortal Xiaoyao sneered and interrupted the praise and cheers of the rest of the people. He said to Xiaoyu with a decisive attitude, "You should not have forgotten what the immortal world was like, right? The immortal world has declined all the way to its current state. Do you still want to continue to lead us to fall?" Xiaoyu's cloudy eyes turned to Xiaoyao. "That is to say, you still made a stupid choice after all." Xiaoyao sneered and said, "I have no choice, Xiaoyu. Do you really think that I can believe your filial piety? Haha, what you said is really nice." Like Xia Xiaohe, she's just an idiot who used the name of the immortal king's daughter to act unscrupulously. She deserves to die. But I clearly remember that you once said to Xia Xiaohe, like Xiao Yao, she's just an ornament pushed to the front of the stage to attract people's attention. My real successor is only you. However, that real successor died in your hands. What nonsense are you talking about? Xiao Yao, what the hell do you want to do? Ignoring the doubts and curses around him, Senior Immortal Xiao Yao continued to point at Xia Yu and scolded. Xia Yu, you can deceive others, but don't think you can deceive me with this nonsense. The fact that I betrayed you has become a fact, and you will eventually absorb me as a sacrifice. In that case, why should I be like those incompetent rats who are obedient to you? You old bastard who has lived for 100,000 years. You will definitely devour yourself to death in the endless void. A complicated look flashed across Xia Yu's face. How did you know about my conversation with Xiao He? You shouldn't know about the things in the Palace of Three Purities. There was a bit of sarcasm in Senior Immortal Xiao Yao's smile. Yes, you have arranged the Palace of Three Purities as an impregnable fortress, and even your most trusted subordinates can't spy on its secrets. When you killed Immortal Qin and Great Ancestor Dushing, it was also in the Palace of Three Purities, and your conversation with Xia Xiaohe was in a private place. So you don't understand why I know what you said at the beginning? Of course it was Xiao He who told me. Xia Yu sighed. As expected, the two of you, yes, so, can you understand why I betrayed you? Whether it's for the great cause of the immortal world or for my own selfishness, I can no longer worship you as king. Xia Yu, you are invincible. Even Wang Lu can't do anything to you when he uses the power of 9 regions. Naturally, I, a junior, am not your opponent. However, even if I die, I will not yield to you. With that, Senior Immortal Xiao Yao ignited the immortal fire all over his body, wanting to perish together with Xia Yu. However, the next moment, an invisible hand covered his head. Xiao Yao felt that his body was empty, and the burning immortal spirit disappeared in an instant. Stupid. Xia Yu said coldly. I actually placed high hopes on an idiot like you. I've really misjudged you. Senior Immortal Xiao Yao smiled wryly. He was indeed an idiot. Xia Yu had placed high hopes on him, so how could there be no mechanism left in his body? Xia Xiaohe was so smart and thought that she was special. She didn't notice the seed in her body at all. How could he be an exception? Self-destruct in front of Xia Yu? He was indeed too naive. But apart from that, what else could he do? His only hope had now been shattered. Wang Lu's decisive blow was actually dodged by Xia Yu. It could only be said that before this, everyone had underestimated the power of the immortal king. With the sacrifice of destroying 10,000 worlds, this 100,000 years old bastard was really powerful to an incredible extent. Xiao Yao, although you are stupid, I will still give you a chance. I will let you witness with your own eyes how I break through the wall of 10,000 worlds and bring a new future for this world. A new future, ha! A greedy old bastard like you, no matter where you go, will only bring disaster and destruction. So what if you break through the 10,000 worlds? Do you want to go to a new world to suck blood and prolong your life? Do you want to destroy all the worlds before you give up? Xia Yu. The next moment, Xia Yu pressed his hand on Xiao Yao's head and blocked his mouth. In just a moment, this senior immortal, who was once the leader of the immortal world, would turn into a handful of fine sand. Just like me? A voice that should have disappeared long ago sounded in the ears of the immortal king again. Chapter 843. You're actually still alive? Xia Yu hid his shock in the light of the immortal king, but his voice was almost uncontrollable. Why is he still not dead? Xia Yu almost couldn't count how many times he had killed Wang Lu, but every time, he could come back to life. Even when Xia Yu opened his immortal eyes and searched all over the 9 regions, he was still alive. Even in the Battle of the 10,000 Realms, Xia Yu rarely saw such a bizarre situation. Those who claimed to be immortal would always have some weakness. As long as the weakness was targeted, there was no enemy that could not be killed. But now, Wang Lu can't figure it out? It's just a small trick. There's no need to make such a fuss. While speaking, the astral wind in the night sky suddenly rolled together, and the twisted air vaguely formed a human-shaped outline. The next moment, Xia Yu took a deep breath, and his mouth seemed to be connected to the endless void, producing a terrifying sharpness. In an instant, it formed a strong hurricane, which sucked all the air around him into his chest, and even the astral wind in the night sky could not escape. And the human figure formed by the strong wind naturally disappeared without a trace. However, the voice of Wang Lu still lingered in Xiaoyu's ears. PFFF, ha 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 ha, taking a deep breath? What kind of dirty trick is this? Is it fun to deceive yourself? Xiaoyu turned his fierce eyes to the ground and saw that on the land of 9 regions, a towering mountain rose from the ground, which vaguely showed a human figure. Its head was composed of countless huge stones that were hundreds of meters square. Its mouth opened and closed, making a dull and mocking laugh. Humph! Xiaoyu stretched out his hand and pointed, and there was an invisible giant palm that fell from the sky and slapped the whole mountain into powder. However, when the mountain fell, the ground at the foot of the mountain cracked open again, from which the sound of the crypt wind came out. Tessesse, look at you, what's the difference between you and a child who fell and hit the ground? You're a dignified immortal king. Why don't you go to hell? The next moment, Xiaoyu directly ignited the core of the earth with his magical ability. Immediately, lava gushed out from the crack in the earth, and then a cold current fell from the sky to condense the lava. The crack in the earth was also filled, and the sound of the crypt wind could no longer be heard. You people in the immortal world really know how to play. However, without the reverse G-Saurus pillar, how long are you going to fight like this? This time, it was another transparent human figure that was distorted by the air. Just when Xiaoyu smashed the mountain, the endless astral wind in the sky filled the air again. Even if you are old and dizzy, you can't see what state I'm in. Of course, Xiaoyu could see it. However, this was truly unimaginable. Even Xiaoyao was in disbelief. Wang Lu, have you fused with 9 regions? The surrounding astral wind brought Wang Lu's laughter. That's right. With the help of the burning blood formation of the 9 states, I will sacrifice my blood to the 9 states. From now on, I will be the protector of the 9 states. Xiaoyu sneered, from a living person to an undead, what is there to be proud of? Undead. Ha 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 ha, my mind is clear now, and I own an entire continent. No matter how you look at it, I'm more like a living person than a trash like you who has been struggling at death's door for 100,000 years. It's fine if it's other people, but what face do you have to mock me? Humph, I don't need to teach you the difference between humans and spirits. Transform into the spirit of 9 regions, and you will die along with this land. The birth and decay of all living things is the law of the world. You've been struggling at death's door for 100,000 years, but you still look so weak. Moreover, you're talking so much. Are you feeling guilty? Xiaoyu simply shut his mouth and stopped talking. Even if he was tens of thousands of years younger, he still wouldn't be a match for Wang Lu in a battle of tongues. Now that Wang Lu had integrated himself into the 9 regions, it was indeed a wonderful move. Although it could be said that he had sacrificed his own life, he could use amazing power in a short period of time. The most important thing was that he could not be killed at all. He was integrated with the 9 regions. As long as the 9 regions were not destroyed, he would not die. However, the reverse G-Saurus pillar, which could destroy the 9 regions, was destroyed by the previous bombardment of the non-phase celestial cannon. With Xiaoyu's power, it was not impossible for him to destroy the world single-handedly, but the price was so tragic that the loss outweighed the gain. Things had indeed become a bit tricky. Wang Lu chose to sacrifice himself to become the spirit of 9 regions, which was tantamount to creating a singularity for the world out of thin air. Before the Great Purge, the immortal world repeatedly probed and delayed the arrival of its main force, for fear that a singularity would suddenly appear in 9 regions one day. The so-called singularity was first used to call the starting point of the creation of all things. In the primordial age, at the beginning of the primal chaos, it was rumored that countless worlds began from a singularity. Later, the singularity was referred to as the starting point of the world's activation, the boundless world. There were always some worlds that tended to be active, and the whole world would gradually acquire the characteristics of life in its operation, and eventually have the will of the world. As the leading ancient world among the worlds, the 9 regions had long had all the conditions to produce the will of the world. However, after millions of years, it was still the rigid laws of heaven and earth that maintained the operation of the 9 regions. Many people in the immortal world suspected that the 9 regions did have its own will a long time ago, probably in the primordial age. At that time, the 9 regions was terrifyingly tyrannical. There were countless powerful people who were favored by the 9 regions, and any one of those sages had the strength beyond the immortal king. However, All things had their ups and downs. The will of the 9 regions gradually declined over time. Until today, the continent had long been a corpse, nothing to be afraid of. When the immortals first came to 9 regions, they were surprised to find that they could control many of the laws of 9 regions freely. Even the providence of the earth was under their control. This was simply incredible. Any world with a little self-respect and self-respect would not allow outsiders to dictate its own providence, unless the place had completely lost its self-awareness and was at the mercy of others. Since the 9 regions was dead, they only needed to be wary of it not producing a singularity and coming back from the dead. For this reason, the immortal world had been cautious enough, but unexpectedly, at the last moment, someone actually integrated himself into the 9 regions and became this deadly singularity. However, fortunately, Wang Lu's awakening was too late. If he had incarnated into the spirit of 9 regions 20 years ago, the arrival of the immortal world would simply be a fantasy. They could not even penetrate the crystal wall of space. But now, the 9 regions was riddled with holes. The southern heaven region was completely destroyed by the reverse Gisaurus pillar, and the shadow of destruction spread all over the place along the feng shui line. Moreover, the 9 regions burning blood and non-phase celestial cannon just now were even more damaged. Wang Lu was completely in control of the endgame and was powerless to make a comeback. In the silence, Senior Immortal Xiaoyao suddenly asked, "Wang Lu, why you? If the 9 regions only needs a guardian, it can be anyone, but why you?" Wang Lu said with a smile, "Why not me? Or rather, who else could it be but me? In the name of the Lord of Holy Light, I have sacrificed hundreds of millions of creatures, but in the end, do I have to be alone? When sacrifice is needed, the leader can take the lead, which is the way to win. Like a certain old bastard who hid in the Palace of 3 Purities and shivered in fear during the fierce battle, and only came out to pick the peach when the overall situation was settled." Upon hearing this, Senior Immortal Xiaoyao was stunned for a long time, and then a smile gradually appeared on his face. Although the 9 regions was still at a disadvantage, with such a guardian, what reason did the 9 regions have to lose? The face of the immortal King Xia Yu was gloomy as never before. Chapter 844. Xia Yu, I'll ask you one last time. How about we stop here and return to the immortal world and mind our own business? It was the same question that was previously raised by Wang Lu as a joke. But at this time, this question from the spirit of 9 regions gave people a heavy pressure. Many of the immortals around Xia Yu felt a strong sense of disharmony. The immortal spirit around them seemed to have encountered obstacles and their operation frequently became sluggish. Although the degree was very slight, it was difficult to ignore. "Your Majesty, I feel that the surrounding laws of heaven and earth have begun to fight against us." In the astral wind, Wang Lu's laughter was full of mockery. "You're starting to feel uncomfortable? In the past, when you came to 9 regions, you were like the proud sons of heaven, and all kinds of laws were open to you. But now, the person who manages the laws is me. Do you think I will give you the convenience in the past? And if you insist on fighting to the death with 9 regions, I can guarantee that the pressure of the laws is not even an appetizer. At most, it's the fragrance of the food from the kitchen, which is very tempting, right? I don't know if you have enough courage to swallow my meal." Wang Lu's voice began to become colder than the cold wind of the 9th sky, and his words were full of naked threats. And this time, it seemed that he really had the capital to threaten the immortals. Even the immortals found it difficult to face an awakened world. Otherwise, when the immortal world came, they would not have to worry about it and make sure that there was no singularity in 9 regions. Now that the situation of strength and weakness had reversed, perhaps it was really time to withdraw to the immortal world and find another way out. For example, before the pantheon of gods, gather the remaining forces to attack the western continent? A few immortals who were quick-witted even considered whether they could use the power of Wang Lu. There were no eternal enemies in the world, only eternal interests. And swallowing the western continent was undoubtedly in line with the interests of 9 regions and the immortal world. At that time, 9 regions could absorb the nutrients of the western continent to restore the damage caused by the reverse Gisaurus pillar and the burning blood of 9 regions. The immortal world could also find enough nourishment from the corpses of the gods of the western continent. However, after thousands of years of planning, would the purge plan come to an abrupt end? After so many sacrifices, did they have to declare failure when they were about to succeed? Wang Lu, don't act smart. If you really had the ability to serve a proper meal, you wouldn't be here talking nonsense. The immortals were at a loss. Xiaoyu's words stabilized their morale. Although the current immortal king was old and not as brilliant as he was when he was young, he was still an immortal king, a king who had fought for 100,000 years. What's more, so what if you can activate all the power of this world? I've fought countless worlds and seen many of them. Wang Lu sighed. Shameless bastard. The next moment, the distorted air of Wang Lu exploded with a loud bang. It was not Xiaoyu who caused the explosion. Instead, it was Wang Lu who removed his air form on his own. As he disintegrated, countless astral wind blades that could cut through space began to dance wildly. The two closest immortals were dismembered on the spot, while more than 10 others were heavily injured. Even Feng Yun, Qing Lu, and the other immortal exalts couldn't help but be in a sorry state. At the same time, they were surprised and bewildered. What kind of wind was this? It could actually kill immortals directly? Senior Immortal Lai Feng said softly. It's just an ordinary astral wind of the 9th heaven. However, after being compressed to the extreme, its power is indeed very strong. Moreover, we have become weak and are suppressed by the laws of heaven and earth, so that many magical abilities can't be used. And in a head-on confrontation with this kind of power of heaven and earth, it would be difficult for us to protect ourselves without reaching the senior immortal stage. Senior Immortal Liu Feng's status in the immortal world was not low. He was especially knowledgeable. Since he said so, it meant that Wang Lu's threat was not empty talk? Insignificant skill. Xiaoyu was still unmoved. How long have you been preparing for that move just now? How many times can you use it after the 9 regions burning blood? As he said that, Xiaoyu suddenly turned his eyes, stretched out his hand, and pointed downward. Suddenly, a stream of fire burst out from his finger. The flame soon turned into a sea of fire, which fell from the sky and covered a radius of thousands of miles. Where the immortal fire covered, even the soil was evaporated and annihilated. In the blink of an eye, a huge unfathomable pit with a diameter of thousands of miles appeared on the 9 regions. Since you have now become the spirit of 9 regions, then no matter how I attack you can feel the pain, right? In the deep pit, Wang Lu's laughter surged. Ha ha ha, it's probably the feeling of being plucked by someone, right? What, this depth makes you complacent? It's just 1,000 miles deep pit. 9 regions. It's not even a layer of membrane. If you want to make me feel pain, you'd better use more force. Very well. Xiaoyu opened his palm and pressed it down. The land of cloud region thousands of miles away began to shake violently. The ground cracked and the rocks collapsed, as if the end of the world had come. This strong earthquake affected a radius of thousands of miles, which was 100 times more powerful than the previous stream of fire. Well, this is a bit interesting. Unfortunately, you still lack strength. Xiaoyu, you've been a tortoise for so many years, but you've really become a waste. You're just wasting your breath. Xiaoyu said and then sneered, if you're really as skilled as you said, why can't you even fight back? I'm accumulating strength. My big move is coming soon. If you have the ability, just float in the same place and don't move. As long as I do it once, I'll kill your whole family. What a joke. Xiaoyu glared at him. Then, from the endless void, the wind of primordial chaos descended. This was the spoils of war obtained by the immortal king during his campaign in the myriad world. It was the product of a highly developed civilization that was highly condensed from the endless void. Its destructive power was almost comparable to that of the reverse G-Saurus pillar. It was one of Xiaoyu's trump cards. This trump card was used by him on Spirit Sword Mountain. The wind of primordial chaos swayed in the air, took away a large part of the sky, and then turned straight down to Spirit Sword Mountain. Although Wang Lu had transformed into the spirit of 9 regions and could be said to be everywhere, people with discerning eyes could see that the core of 9 regions at this time was Spirit Sword Mountain. All of Wang Lu's relatives and friends, as well as the essence of the immortal cultivation world of 9 regions, were on Spirit Sword Mountain. If this mountain was destroyed, Wang Lu would be alone. From his standpoint, he could tolerate the falling fire from the sky and the thousands of miles of strong earthquake, but he could never tolerate the disappearance of Spirit Sword Mountain. Therefore, aiming at Spirit Sword Mountain, he could force out Wang Lu's trump card. However, unexpectedly, until the wind of primordial chaos blew through the earth and turned Spirit Sword Mountain into nothingness in an instant, Wang Lu did not give any response. After this guy became the spirit of the land, Did he even lose his human feelings? No. What was blown away by the wind of primordial chaos was just an illusion. A mountain that was exactly the same but empty. There was no bloody smell in the wind of primordial chaos. When he detonated the astral wind bomb just now, he unknowingly replaced Spirit Sword Mountain with the magical power of the land spirit. In an instant, Xiaoyu judged the truth based on his battle instinct, and the next moment, he began to search for the real location of Spirit Sword Mountain with the magical power of the Immortal King. Although this continent was under the control of Wang Lu, obstructing him everywhere, and every law was blocking the intention of the Immortal King, making it difficult for his perception to reach every corner of 9 regions, Xiaoyu still withstood the pressure of 9 regions with his absolute strength and found the real location of Spirit Sword Mountain. That answer really surprised him. How dare they move the Spirit Sword Mountain to the Southern Heaven region? At this time, the Southern Heaven region had long been a piece of nothingness. It could be said that it was no longer the territory of 9 regions. God knew how Wang Lu moved it there in the blink of an eye. But it was indeed because it was not common sense that it took Xiaoyu some time to lock its location. Unfortunately, it only took a little more time. You guys watch him. Xiaoyu pointed to Xiao Yao and motioned the other immortals to control him. For this rebellious illegitimate child, Xiaoyu was still reluctant to make a move. It was better to keep this life-prolonging dish for a while. At this time, Senior Immortal Xiao Yao smiled and shrugged his shoulders, indicating that he would not struggle anymore. This smile gave Xiaoyu an inexplicable sense of foreboding. The premonition of the Immortal King had always been accurate, but this time, Xiaoyu did not follow the instructions of the premonition. He directly rushed to the Southern Heaven region, the Spirit Sword Mountain that stood in the darkness. At this moment, on the Spirit Sword Mountain, a woman in snow-white clothes was jumping on the stellar peak, as if she was stretching her muscles and bones. She held a sword in her right hand, her palm was slightly moist, and she looked a little nervous. A moment later, she looked up and showed a beautiful smile. Hoo-hoo, I'm ready, come on. Chapter 845. On the stellar peak, the remaining forces of 9 regions had all gathered to provide the necessary support for Wang Wu in various ways. Needless to say, the treasured elixirs of the major sects, many king pills, even the king pill and yuanying that belonged to them were contributed. When Wang Wu resisted the palm of the Immortal King by herself, many of the 3,000 king pills in her body were damaged. However, when she returned to the stellar peak, there were more king pills waiting for her. Some of these king pills came from the dead cultivators, and some were simply taken from the living. At this point in the battle, there was no need for anyone to hold back. In the face of the Immortal King Xiaoyu, if there was no equal level of power, the number was meaningless. Even if there were 10 million king pill cultivators on Spirit Sword Mountain, it was impossible to withstand a casual blow from the Immortal King. At this moment, only 2 people, Wang Wu and Wang Lu, had the ability to struggle in front of the Immortal King. If they couldn't hold on, the others would also die. At this time, Wang Wu looked more excited than nervous. Although her injury had not healed, the power that she could use in a short period of time had reached its peak. The 3,000 king pills were full, and the bone sword in her hand had become heavier. The core of the sword was still her own bone, but it was covered with a layer of immortal bone. It was the most precious treasure refined from the remains of immortals by the master refiners of 10,000 Arts sect. It was wrapped around the bone sword, making it sharper and stronger than before. In general, Wang Wu's power was not as pure and refined as before, but in terms of quantity, it was more than twice as much. And the work that she had to do next happened to not need to be so delicate. Right now this state was just right. Junior sister, don't force yourself too much. At this point the most important thing is that you can survive. There was some loneliness between the brows of Feng Yin Taoist master. Looking at the ruins on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain, his heart was at a loss. His stellar divine eyes had long been unable to see through the future, and he could not even solve the cause and effect. Whether eldest senior brother could defy the heavens and change his fate, no one could say for sure. Then, if he wanted to prepare for the worst, in the entire 9 regions, there were only 2 people who should survive. Among them, Wang Lu had integrated himself into the 9 regions and became the land spirit, so it was impossible for him to be alone. Other than him, the most suitable candidate was Wang Wu. The 3,000 king pill in her body contained various laws of 9 regions and even the Western continent. Although limited by the quality of the king pill, These laws were only embryonic forms. Each embryonic form meant infinite possibilities. As long as she was alive, she would be a miniature 9 regions mobile library, a burning tinder. Besides that, she was able to cultivate the outer Tao in a short period of 200 years and go against an immortal king by herself. This natural talent and ability was probably on par with Wang Lu. Therefore, no matter what other people thought, Feng Yin hoped that Wang Wu could live on. Even if she was struggling at death's door, as long as she was alive, there was hope. Tisk, senior brother, you're spreading negative energy again. Wang Wu turned her head and wanted to laugh at her senior brother, who had been the sect leader of Spirit Sword sect for 200 years. However, looking at the aging face of Feng Yin, she suddenly couldn't bear it. She was the one who inherited the legacy of her big brother. However, over the years, most of her energy was devoted to personal cultivation, to nourish the external king pill, and to optimize the non-phase method. All the affairs of the whole Lingjian school, big and small, were supported by Feng Yin. His age was not too different from hers, but at this time, he had aged like this. Of course, Feng Yin was indeed a guy who liked to worry and was prone to premature aging. Don't worry, my life is given by him, so it won't be so easy to die. Of course I can live. Not just me, all of us can live. In fact, we've already won this battle. Feng Yin was stunned because he could see that Wang Wu didn't seem to be joking. Instead, she really had something to rely on. What other cards does Wang Lu have in his hand? No, those are the only tricks he can use. Wang Wu shook her head. Don't think that he's omnipotent. Transforming into the spirit of 9 regions is purely out of helplessness. Moreover, it happened in a hurry, so he has no time to adapt to the new power. 9 regions burning blood and non-phase celestial cannon are just the most superficial application of the power of 9 regions. If he wants to command the whole continent like an arm, he needs to cultivate for at least a few hundred years. However, looking at the current state of 9 regions, it's estimated that he would be finished in a few hundred years, ha ha ha. Feng Yin was shocked. Since the situation is so bad, how could you laugh? Wang Wu said with a smile. Because our opponent is not that strong. He's just an old man who is struggling at death's door. Why do we need any new tricks to deal with him? Wang Lu's layout just now is enough. You probably didn't notice it, but Wang Lu's killer move has already been played. Killer move. There's no time to explain it to you in detail. The old guy is coming, so I'm ready to start work. With that, Wang Wu pointed her toes down. It was an understatement, but it released an infinite force, which shook the entire stellar peak. However, instead of flying straight into the sky with the force of the shock, she deeply rooted her heels into the mountain and integrated with it. In an instant, Wang Wu seemed to have become the spirit of Spirit Sword Mountain. She could absorb the power of the mountain and share the damage suffered by Spirit Sword Mountain. Wang Wu vowed to live and die with Spirit Sword Mountain. The immortal king came very quickly. For the god of war who had crossed the endless void and fought in countless worlds, 9 regions was too small. With a single thought, he could tear the space and cross thousands of rivers and mountains. Xueqi was not worried that the Spirit Sword Mountain could escape. It was not easy for 9 regions to move an immortal mountain from one part of the continent to the other in an instant. Especially now, 9 regions could not afford to consume too much energy. Xueqi even doubted whether Wang Lu could use the non-phase celestial cannon that he was proud of after forcibly moving the Spirit Sword Mountain. The weakness of 9 regions was visible to the naked eye, and nearly half of the Earth's spiritual veins were in a state of exhaustion. Even if 9 regions was lucky enough to escape from the Great Purge, it was only half a step away from the real age of chaos. This was really a lose-lose battle. No wonder Wang Lu would still propose reconciliation when 9 regions suffered a great disaster. Unfortunately, Xueqi did not intend to stop here, and he could not stop here. After paying such a huge price, he could not afford to fail more than Wang Lu. After coming out of the Palace of 3 Purities, the immortal king was no longer the high and mighty king, but Xueqi, who was the focus of attention. His every move was watched, and his every flaw was seen. After senior immortal Xiaoyao betrayed him and pointed out everything he had done in order to seek immortality, Xueqi faced great doubts. If he was at his peak, even if he was opposed by everyone, he could still use violence to subdue them. However, Xueqi, who was close to the end of his life, could not afford to lose too much. In a sense, he was not much different from this dilapidated 9 regions. Therefore this time he had to win. He had to regain their trust with a magnificent victory so that his men could continue to be obedient. And the first act of this great victory was the destruction of Spirit Sword Mountain. Xiaoyu had long seen Wang Wu standing on the top of the stellar peak. He also saw the 3,000 king pill in her body and the bone sword in her hand. If it was a head-on confrontation, she was indeed a strong opponent. Her non-phase sword technique was extremely evil and simply unreasonable. Even the palm of the immortal king could not destroy it in a short time. However, the reason why the immortal king was the immortal king was that, in addition to his powerful strength, the more important thing was that his magical ability was mysterious. If a head-on attack didn't work, Xiaoyu still had too many flexible means. His left hand lit a fire, which was the innate fire taken from the Hongmeng ruins, and his right hand was a vast expanse of white cold wind, which was a wisp of pure Yin ice breath inherited from the Desolation Age. With the power of ice and fire Yin and Yang grinding, even the strongest sword defense would definitely not be able to withstand it. Xiaoyu once used this trick to break through the gate of the pantheon of the Western continent. He did not believe that Wang Wu could be stronger than the former pantheon of the Western continent. However, just as Xiaoyu was about to release the power of his left and right hands, he suddenly saw an undisguised, crafty smile on Wang Wu's face. The next moment, the sky behind him suddenly shone brightly, and an incomparably familiar force fell from the sky. Xiaoyu didn't need to look back to know what the surging energy behind him was. Non-phase celestial cannon? How is this possible? Even if 9 regions still had hidden power, the signs before the launch of the non-phase celestial cannon were very obvious, so it was impossible for Xiaoyu not to notice it. What's more, the celestial cannon should be launched from the bottom up. How could it fall from the sky? Unless, in an instant, countless pictures emerged in Xiaoyu's mind, and then he quickly fixed on one of them. It was the first time that Wang Lu released the non-phase celestial cannon with all her might. At that time, although Xiaoyu was a bit in a hurry, he still dodged and blocked at the critical moment, letting the power of the celestial cannon break through the sky and enter the endless void. At that time, Xiaoyu didn't even think about where the energy of the celestial cannon would eventually go. Because generally speaking, no matter how powerful the power was, once it was lost in the endless void, it would inevitably be exhausted. Now that he thought about it, from that time on, Wang Lu had quietly set up a trap. The celestial cannon broke through the sky and entered the endless void. It was a mysterious place where time and space had lost their meaning. Of course, it was very likely that the energy of the celestial cannon would be lost in it forever, but it was also possible that, after a period of time, it suddenly changed its direction in the endless void and came back to 9 regions. Xiaoyu still couldn't figure out how to do this. It was probably to use the sky tower on the stellar peak to tear the space barrier and guide the energy of the celestial cannon back to 9 regions. This was the only reason that could explain it. Similarly, on the Spirit Sword Mountain, it was easy to understand that Wang Wu put on a fight to the death posture. She didn't want to fight against the immortal king, but to block the aftermath of the celestial cannon that fell from the sky. After all, it was directly guided to the stellar peak. Unfortunately, Xiaoyu understood it a bit too late. The power of the celestial cannon had completely enveloped him. Xiaoyu couldn't avoid it and could only confront it head-on. The innate fire in his left hand and the ice breath in his right hand were exhausted in an instant, and then his immortal robe, as well as the flesh and blood under the robe. In the huge torrent of energy, Xiaoyu roared, "Wang Lu, good plan. Ha ha ha, you're welcome." Chapter 846. Xiaoyu was in a sea of fire. The fire was the anger of 9 regions, the anger of being repeatedly invaded by the immortal world for tens of thousands of years, the anger of the destruction of the ancient southern heaven region, and the anger of the sudden interruption of the long sleep. This was the first time Xiaoyu had tasted the wrath of a world, and the flames were much more intense than he had imagined. The moment he was in the sea of fire, his body that had been tempered hundreds and thousands of times and was close to flawless began to melt rapidly, and the immortal spirit that covered his body also disappeared. He couldn't dodge, he couldn't evade, and he had no way to block it. Immortal King Xiaoyu, who had dominated the myriad realms, was slowly dying in the sea of fire of the heaven-blasting cannon. In the sea of fire, Xiaoyu heard the wails of billions of resentful spirits. Those were the souls of those who had died since the arrival of the celestial world. At this moment, they poured the most vicious curses on Xiaoyu, corroding his immortal body. In the sea of fire, Xiaoyu saw the collapse of the sky and the destruction of all things. It was the curse cast by the souls of the dead in the southern heaven region that was destroyed by the reversed Gisaurus pillar. The power of the curse of the earth was infinite. In an instant, it damaged the immortal mansion inside Xiaoyu's body, and countless immortal mountains and jade stones collapsed. The immortal's mansion inside the immortal's body was the foundation of cultivation. The revenge of the southern heaven region almost damaged Xiaoyu's foundation. In the Sea of Fire, Xiaoyu also saw his old opponents from the War of 10,000 Worlds. There were gods of the western continent, as well as strange creatures from different realms. They either cursed at him, loudly ridiculed him, or simply came to cut his flesh with sharp weapons, bringing him endless pain like a tide. This was the fire of the heart, and it was also the demon of the heart. The appearance of the mortal enemy meant that the anger of Jojo had seeped into Xiaoyu's primordial spirit, and it began to work together from inside and outside to disintegrate his existence. Even an immortal king would not be able to hold on for long in such a scorching flame. However, at this time, Xiaoyu could only silently bear the heavy pressure of destruction. After being hit head-on by the non-phase celestial cannon, his immortal king magical power almost instantly disintegrated. At this time, even if he wanted to escape from the Sea of Fire at all costs, he was powerless. However, there was still a chance to turn things around. Xiaoyu calmly looked down. Through the blazing flames, his eyes fell on Spirit Sword Mountain. Over there was another person struggling to hold on. Tisk, why is that old bastard not dead yet? On the stellar peak, Wang Wu held her sword with one hand and held up a milky white dome above her head. Above the dome, the endless sea of fire poured down like a waterfall, but it was intercepted by the non-phase sword halfway. However, the sea of fire was ruthless and endless. It constantly battered Wang Wu's sword defense, making it more and more difficult for her to support it. But she had no choice but to persevere. When Wang Lu released the full power attack of the non-phase celestial cannon, he mixed it with the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman. Then, with Spirit Sword Mountain as a beacon, the non-phase celestial cannon in the endless void was guided back to 9 regions. As long as they cut open the spatial barrier at the right place and ensured that the immortal king was between the gap in the barrier and the stellar peak, then, even the immortal king would not be able to avoid falling into the trap. This was the plan that Wang Lu had formulated before he returned to 9 regions. A considerable part of it was risky, and a slight mistake would lead to a complete loss. For example, how to ensure that the celestial cannon would not be permanently lost after entering the endless void. How to ensure that Xiaoyu would not find out the truth from the beginning to the end and thus avoid the surprise attack from behind. The most important thing was that there was a huge loophole in this 3-point and 1-line plan. The power of the non-phase celestial cannon was endless, so how to ensure that this power was blocked by the immortal king and not directly fell on the head of Spirit Sword Mountain? In fact, of course, there was no inevitable guarantee for these matters. What Wang Lu could do was to arrange a few insurances at every step. As for whether it would work or not, it could only be left to fate. After all, if he didn't take risks, how could he make up for the huge strength gap between him and the immortal king? Fortunately, the plan finally advanced smoothly to the last step. However, this last step was more difficult than all the previous steps combined. The most worrying situation finally happened. In the 3-point and 1-line plan, the immortal king in the center did not absorb all the power of the non-phase celestial cannon. About 30% of the power bypassed the immortal king and directly descended on Spirit Sword Mountain. This non-phase celestial cannon came from the endless void and relied on the positioning of Spirit Sword Mountain to maintain its cohesion. However, if it was hit head-on, the Spirit Sword Mountain would be destroyed in an instant. The non-phase celestial cannon would also collapse because of the loss of guidance, and Xiaoyu, who was trapped in the Sea of Fire, would immediately be free. At that time, even if Xiaoyu had been seriously injured by the non-phase celestial cannon, by virtue of his absolute advantage in stage, no one could control him. Therefore, according to Wang Lu's plan, Xiaoyu must be completely killed in one go. Before he fell, the impact of the non-phase celestial cannon must not stop. And as the most important insurance on Spirit Sword Mountain, Wang Wu's sword must not have the slightest mistake. The pressure that Wang Wu was under could be imagined. After an unknown amount of time, the pillar of fire that descended from the void was still pouring down. The woman felt that her wrist had become numb. She could not help but raise her head anxiously and look at the immortal king in the Sea of Fire. She saw that although he was in a sorry state and his immortal body had disintegrated by a small part, his posture was still as firm as a reef in the big waves. Tisk, those who can live for 100,000 years are really not easy to deal with. At such an old age, they are still so strong. Presumably, they have been tempered in the harem. As soon as her voice fell, a crisp sound burst out from the dome above her. Wang Wu's complexion changed, and she hastily extracted more true yuan from her body and poured it into the white bone sword. Only then was she able to make up for the gap. It was just that this time, she exerted too much force, and many of the originally stable 3,000 king pills suddenly began to become restless. After all, not all of them were original goods, so there were shortcomings in stability and compatibility. If Wang Lu hadn't explained the various characteristics of the non-phase celestial cannon to her in advance, so that she could calmly lay out a targeted line of defense. In the face of the 30% power of the non-phase celestial cannon, Wang Wu's sword defense would have been broken long ago. Xiaoyu, oh Xiaoyu, please die quickly. This is considered a good deed, okay? Of course, Wang Wu's call did not have any effect. On the contrary, Xiaoyu seemed to have gradually adapted to the bombardment of the non-phase celestial cannon. Although his body was still constantly disintegrating, the remaining parts began a new round of rejuvenation. His loose skin and flesh became compact, and his silver hair gradually turned black. The magical power that belonged to the immortal king was returning little by little. Of course, compared to Xiaoyu's recovery speed, the speed of destruction was a little faster. In this way, before he had time to recover to his peak, he would definitely die without a burial place. But Xiaoyu's unexpected rejuvenation greatly slowed down the pace of destruction. And considering that Xiaoyu had a chance to turn the tables at any time before he was completely annihilated, therefore Wang Wu, who was at the top of the star peak, had to persevere to the end. In this regard, Wang Wu could only smile bitterly and said, Wang Lu, that be *tch, didn't say that this job was so hard before. I thought that as long as I persisted for 3 to 5 breaths of time, it would be enough. But now, what's the difference between me and Xiaoyu? And if this goes on, I'm afraid that my side will be finished first. Wang Lu, you swindler, even after becoming the spirit of 9 regions, you still won't change. As soon as her voice fell, Wang Lu's voice sounded in her heart. Teske, how wonderful do you expect me to be in this kind of plan that involves the immortal king? It's already amazing enough to be able to calculate this step, okay? Wang Wu responded. Then I'll have to trouble you to think of another earth-shattering method to help me hold on for a while longer. I really can't hold on any longer. Well, I know, I'm thinking. A moment later. Well, I've thought of one. It was obviously good news, but Wang Lu's voice didn't sound happy at all. Wang Wu, get ready to say goodbye to Spirit Sword Mountain. Chapter 847. Say goodbye to Spirit Sword Mountain. You're really worthy. You can even come up with this kind of desperate plan. Wang Wu understood and absorbed Wang Lu's overall plan in an instant, and then she was amazed. Wang Lu's idea was very simple. Right now, whether it was the immortal king or Wang Wu, they were just struggling to hold on and were only one step away from collapse. Then, as long as this step was taken, all the problems would be solved. Of course, in this kind of big battle between 9 regions and the immortal king, there were very few people who were qualified to take this step. Even if an immortal was close to the Sea of Fire, he would be roasted inside. Qing Lu, Lai Feng, and other senior immortals might be able to get closer, but they couldn't get close to the core. The only one who had the ability to intervene in all this was Xiao Yao, but how could Xiao Yao come to help Xiaoyu? On the contrary, he single-handedly restrained many people around him and rendered them unable to move. At this moment, in 9 regions, only Wang Lu was qualified to take this step. Most of his power was used to maintain the output of the non-phase celestial cannon, so he basically had no time to care about other things. However, he also had the identity of the spirit of 9 regions, which could control all the famous mountains and rivers in the world, and Spirit Sword Mountain was no exception. What Wang Lu had to do was to separate a little bit of power to uproot Spirit Sword Mountain from the ground, and then throw it like a hidden weapon to smash Xiaoyu's face. In theory, this was indeed an excellent method. Although Spirit Sword Mountain was not born for hidden weapons, the spiritual power contained in the mountain was extremely abundant. Once it erupted, the sky would fall and the earth would crack. When Xiaoyu was tired of dealing with the non-phase celestial cannon, it could play the role of the last straw and immediately solve the dilemma in front of him. However, the price was really tragic. After all, this was not a nameless barren mountain, but one of the most valuable spiritual mountains in 9 regions. It was also the core of 9 regions. At the same time, it was also the home of Wang Wu and Wang Lu. They were cultivators who had cut off their ties with the mortal world and entered the immortal path. The mortal family had long been meaningless. Spirit Sword Mountain was their real home. This mountain carried too many memories and thoughts. Even though the Spirit Sword Mountain had been riddled with holes in the previous battle, the main peak still stood tall, and the mountain was still full of the hopes of countless people. So you just treat Spirit Sword Mountain as a consumable? After becoming the land spirit of 9 regions, he has already become ruthless towards his original place of belonging. What a tasteless man. *T. It's not your turn to question me with such a stupid question as the record holder of the 9 regions. Don't forget, I regard myself as a consumable. What's a mere Spirit Sword Mountain? After a pause, Wang Lu said in Wang Wu's mind. Moreover, I am now the spirit of 9 regions. If Spirit Sword Mountain is destroyed, I can move Kunlun Mountain to repay the debt. Zhou Mumu will hate you to death. It doesn't matter, I'll give them the old home of Shangjing sect. Hey, you're indebted to old Taoist Tuesday. Then I have to give Royal Soldier sect to Shangjing sect people. In any case, the people of Royal Soldier sect are all heroes, so they should be able to get through after setting up a tent. Not to mention that this deal is completely unfair. It can't make up for the loss of Shangjing sect people. Moreover, just because the lead disciple of Royal Soldier sect is a man, you're not going to give them any compensation? After sighing, Wang Wu's expression became serious. Do what you want to do, you know I will definitely support you. Yeah, no matter how much benefit I get, it's now considered as the property of the couple, right? Hee, even if you say that, I won't blush, so don't talk nonsense. If you want to do it, then hurry up. I really can't hold on here. With that last sentence, Wang Wu took a deep breath. This was also the last breath that she could take into her body at present. Under the cleansing of the aftermath of the non-phase celestial cannon, her internal organs began to rupture, and the 3000 king pill was no longer round. It became dim and irritable, as if it could jump out of the Jade Mansion at any time and tear Wang Wu apart. Her time was only very, very short, and similarly, the time that belonged to 9 regions was also very, very short. Even when Wang Wu looked up, she could see the relieved smile on Xia Yu's face. Old fool, what are you laughing at? Wang Wu very extravagantly used her remaining breath to curse. The next moment, the rocks under her feet shook, and endless lifting force emerged. Spirit Sword Mountain began to fly up from the bottom to the sky. As the spirit of 9 regions, moving the land of 9 regions was as natural as lifting a hand. Even though the 9 regions was extremely weak at this time, it was still easy to gather the last bit of strength to push Spirit Sword Mountain up. In the twinkling of an eye, Spirit Sword Mountain left the ground and flew up at an amazing speed. The distance with Xia Yu rapidly shortened, and in this short moment, Wang Wu stood on the top of the mountain, still supporting the sword defense to ensure that Spirit Sword Mountain could collide with Xia Yu in the most perfect posture. At the same time, her attention gradually diverted to other places. Looking around, she looked down at the Spirit Sword Mountain for the last time. At this moment, the mountain had already been cleared. Feng Yin, Lucian, Feng He, and other cultivators who gathered here to fight against the fallen immortals had been teleported out by Wang Lu's array in the mountain, far away so as not to be buried with them. The once lively and bustling Spirit Sword Mountain had become extremely quiet. Vaguely, Wang Wu felt as if she had returned to 200 years ago. At that time, the Lingjian school had just experienced the biggest disaster. The elites of the school were almost wiped out, and it was also empty and lonely. In the empty mountain, Wang Wu saw the place where she played when she was young, the place where her master used to teach, the grove where she used to hide and peek at her big brother, and the wreckage of the non-phase peak that had accompanied her for many years. For a time, even with her temperament, she couldn't help but sigh. The world is changeable and unpredictable. Spirit Sword Mountain has been established for thousands of years and has experienced the vicissitudes of life. Unexpectedly, it has come to an end here. Hey, wait, I seem to have forgotten something important. In an instant, Spirit Sword Mountain was only 300 meters away from Xia Yu, and the panic on the face of the Immortal King was clear. Wait, I understand. We can mind our own business. I'll return to the immortal world. There's no need for both sides to suffer. The thought of the immortal king resounded in all directions in the shortest possible time. However, of course, it received a ridicule from Wang Lu. "Old fool, I was very merciful and proposed to wipe your face outside and never go in, but you didn't agree. Now you're about to explode and you still want to leave? How could it be that easy?" Xia Yu's face instantly turned livid, because the immortal king's divine eyes had already seen the future that was about to happen. There was no room for mediation, and there was no possibility of change. The immortal king who had dominated the world was doomed to die here. However, Wang Wu sneered and said, "Well done, the last memory of a dignified immortal king is your dirty joke. But with your face, you have the nerve to criticize me as the record holder of the lower limit? Don't forget, I inherited your legacy." While speaking, Wang Wu's mind suddenly flashed and she realized the problem that she had ignored. What the hell? What should I do after the big collision? Wang Lu could activate the array to transfer everyone else away, but Wang Wu could not. And being sandwiched between the immortal king and the spirit sword mountain, Wang Wu did not think that she could afford the pleasure of being sandwiched between the immortal king and the spirit sword mountain. Wang Lu, Wang Lu, Wang Lu, don't be a hooligan, hurry up and save people. In the exclamation and even the scream of Wang Wu, the most important collision in tens of thousands of years in 9 regions detonated. The earth-shattering explosion from the southern heaven region almost distorted the 9 regions. In the several regions closest to the southern heaven region, nearly half of the land was swept by the strong light and the shock wave. The closest location even experienced a violent earthquake that lasted for half an hour. The ground rippled like water, making a vibration with an amplitude of hundreds of meters, and all the tangible and intangible things were torn apart. Even if it was the farthest place from the southern heaven region, there would still be a strong earthquake. The impact was not only along the earth, but also transmitted from the feng shui line to all parts of the 9 regions, forming many mountains and basins, rivers and lakes. At the same time, the news of the fall of the immortal king Xia Yu spread to all directions. All the creatures in the 9 regions had a glimmer of understanding from the bottom of their hearts. A certain powerful enemy had disappeared forever. This was the high-profile victory declaration made by the spirit of 9 regions. After the big explosion, Wang Lu directly engraved the result in everyone's heart. It was also the strange phenomenon caused by the collapse of the law around the immortal king when he fell. No matter how muddle-headed Xia Yu was in his old age, he was, after all, the immortal king with the highest cultivation base in the myriad worlds. After the big explosion, there were no bones left of him, and the energy and consciousness that had been accumulated for 100,000 years dissipated. Many animals that were trembling in the cave walked out one after another. They looked up at the sky that was blooming with extraordinary colors and felt the unprecedented clear sunlight. Then they could not help but become wild with joy. The monsters who had already opened their spiritual wisdom realized that there would be good fortune after surviving a disaster. Thus, they hurriedly seized the time to absorb the scattered energy between heaven and earth. This was the relic of the immortal king, which was infinitely wonderful. Even if it was only a trivial trace, it was enough to produce countless miracles. The wild animals who had not opened their spiritual wisdom also had their own way of celebrating. Most of the animals directly entered the estrus period and solved the problem of reproduction in the wildest way. As for the mortals, their reactions were different. Some were revelers, some took advantage of the chaos, and so on. Of course, in addition to this, the cultivators of 9 regions also realized that the battle had finally come to an end. In particular, when they saw the once famous immortals, they looked as if they had just lost their parents and were walking dead, which was even more conclusive. How could this be? Senior Immortal Fengyun looked at the sky in disbelief. His whole body trembled, and he couldn't even restrain his immortal spirit from collapsing. Your Majesty, you. Senior Immortal Qing Lu shook her head with a sad look on her face. Only Senior Immortal Xiaoyao seemed to have fallen to the ground. He sighed softly and said, "After so many hardships, this world has finally survived." Chapter 848. On the green grassland, a white tombstone quietly faced the breeze. There was no word above the tombstone, but it was full of the vicissitudes of time. A young man stood silently in front of the tombstone. His eyes were filled with both compassion and relief. A man and a tombstone stood facing each other. No matter how many days and nights passed, the tombstone was still standing on the grass, and the man did not move an inch. It was as if he would stand there forever, even if the earth grew old and the sky became desolate. Until the arrival of an uninvited guest broke the silence here. The man had white hair, wrinkled face, and slightly bent back, which showed his old age. Only his pair of eyes were still as sharp as the autumn water. At his waist was a long sword, which was as bright as the Milky Way, indicating the identity of this person. He was the head of Lingjian School, the successor of the stellar sword method, Feng Yin Taoist master. "You're still here." Hearing the voice behind him, the young man seemed to wake up from a dream. He turned his head and reluctantly put on a polite smile on his face, but he couldn't even say a word of greeting. Feng Yin Taoist master didn't say much. He just took 2 steps forward and stood side by side with the young man, silently watching the blank tombstone. After a long time, Feng Yin sighed. "Gods will make fun of people." The young man was stunned, and then his face showed bitterness. "God's will? I don't believe in God's will all my life, and I don't believe in God's will. However, today, if it's not God's will making fun of people, how could things end up like this?" "Before I came," Feng Yin softly said, "I wanted to say my condolences to you, but when I thought of what this person did, I couldn't say it." The young man closed his eyes and also sighed. In the second half of Xiaoyu's life, he did all kinds of evil things. Even I, his son, wanted to rebel against him. He really doesn't deserve any condolences. I should thank you for leaving this cemetery for him in this reborn southern heaven region. Feng Yin said, Xiaoyu is, after all, the leader of the immortal path. In the first half of his life, he was wise and powerful, and made outstanding military achievements. The immortal world was once the dream of us 9 regions cultivators. Let this tombstone be a tribute to the immortal world, to the dream of cultivation. That's right. There's no immortal realm left. It's impossible for a new immortal realm to be born in the great 1,000 worlds. At this point, both of them could not help but fall silent. After a long time, Feng Yin asked, "What do you plan to do after this?" Was he really going to explore the Wall of Worlds? "Actually, you don't have to." Senior Immortal Xiaoyao interrupted. "I know. I am very grateful that you can accept me, a defeated prisoner, regardless of the former enmity. However, 9 regions is not my home. I am different from those immortals who ascended from 9 regions. I was born in the immortal world and grew up in the immortal world. The immortal world has been destroyed. Although this world is big, there is no place for me. Moreover, the longer I stay here, the harder it will be for me to bear the torment of my conscience. So, please forgive me for rejecting your kind intentions." Feng Yin was a little regretful. However, the Wall of Worlds. Well, the Wall of Worlds is dangerous. Even with Xiaoyu's strength, he doesn't have much confidence in breaking through it. "I'm probably going to die on this trip," Xiaoyao said with a smile. "However, I have no regrets in dying on the eve of the new world. What's more, I have someone to accompany me on this trip, so I won't be lonely." While speaking, a beautiful figure floated over from afar. It was a slender and light woman with a glittering and translucent gem in the center of her forehead. Her eyebrows were indifferent with a smile, and she was extremely beautiful. When Feng Yin saw the woman, he raised his eyebrows in surprise and said, "She is my wife Yanluo." Senior Immortal Xiaoyao gently stated her identity and stopped Feng Yin's intention to continue to ask with a firm look. Feng Yin did have a lot of doubts in his heart. Yanluo, the commander of the Immortal World slave army, should have died in the hands of Wang Lu. Even her body was broken and incomplete. Later, although it was recovered by Xiaoyao, the dead could not be resurrected. So, what was this Yanluo? What's more, wasn't the love of Senior Immortal Xiaoyao Xia Xiaohe? Why did he call Yanluo his wife? However, out of respect for Xiaoyao, Feng Yin did not look for the root of the problem, nor did he open his stellar divine eyes to see the real situation of Yanluo. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao saluted Feng Yin again and said in a clear voice, "I have been delayed here for long enough. I will go with my wife. I hope to see you in the new world in my lifetime. When we meet again, I will prepare good wine and delicious food." Then, Senior Immortal Xiaoyao took Yanluo's hand, flew in the air, and soon disappeared into the sky. Feng Yin looked at their backs in the distance, and after a long time, he sighed again. It was just that before the sigh fell, he heard someone snorting coldly behind him. "Humph, this bastard is about to die, but he still has a sharp tongue." Hearing this voice, Feng Yin quickly turned around and cupped his hands. Golden King, you're here too. Humph. The blonde and red-eyed Golden King glanced at Feng Yin with some disgust and said, You hypocritical bastards, you know that he won't live long, why do you still insist on keeping him here? If he wants to die in the Wall of Worlds, just let him be. Feng Yin smiled and didn't say much. He was very clear about the purpose of Golden King's visit. When the group of immortals besieged Spirit Sword Mountain, Golden King almost single-handedly propped up the line of defense. Then he was knocked down by senior immortal Xiaoyao and seriously injured. For the arrogant Golden King, that battle was simply a great shame and humiliation. Although everyone thought that it was great for him to fight against a god-level immortal as a demigod, Golden King himself was obviously not satisfied. Therefore, the resentment in his heart towards senior immortal Xiaoyao could be imagined. Feng Yin came to say goodbye to Xiaoyao, and Golden King also came to say goodbye in another form. Unfortunately, Feng Yin came early enough to intercept all the plans of Golden King, so that he could only curse a few words to vent his anger. A patricide short-lived ghost, coupled with a corpse girl that fuses two personalities, it's a good death-seeking combination. As a result, before Golden King could finish his words, he felt a chill behind his back. Is this your magnanimity as the Golden King, Gil? Golden King's face suddenly twisted and tangled, and then he squeezed out a few words from his teeth. Night King. What are you doing here? Aya was silent. Her clear blue eyes quietly watched the Golden King. And this silence made Golden King more and more uncomfortable. Humph. I know. I'm going to prepare for the expedition, but don't even think about running away. You're the main commander in the expedition to the Western continent. Aya raised her eyebrows and said, When did I say I'm going to run away? Besides, you said I'm the main commander. Then what are you? My boss? Golden King was unable to speak for a long time. Finally, he turned around and left with a look of exasperation on his face. After Golden King left, Aya stood silently in front of the tombstone for a while, feeling a little melancholy in her heart. The immortal world had been destroyed, and the Pantheon was actually just a dying struggling at death's door. Even if there was no expedition organized by Golden King, it was only a matter of time before it was destroyed. This old world really didn't have much time left. It was not a bad move for senior immortal Xiaoyao to choose to die in the Wall of Worlds. At least, he would be remembered as a great pioneer, although the fact that he carried a corpse girl with him was a bit. For the current 9 regions, there was no time to slowly rebuild after the war. In less than 100 years, 9 regions must begin to migrate and break through the Wall of Worlds and enter the new world before its own lifespan was exhausted. There were countless challenges to be faced. Winning the victory against the immortal world was actually just the beginning, and the real test was yet to come. However, the most difficult hurdle had been passed, and the next hurdle must be infinite light. Aya looked up at the sun sky and smiled slightly. For the sake of this peaceful sun sky, countless people had sacrificed their lives, and their sacrifice would not become meaningless. Don't worry, your sacrifice will not become meaningless. At the same time, on an unknown mountain in 9 regions, there was a bamboo room and a crystal-like lake. There was a nameless stone tablet beside the lake. In front of the tablet, a woman in white sat on the ground, her eyes full of sadness. The post-war reconstruction work has gone smoothly. Although this fierce war has greatly damaged the vitality of 9 regions, there are still a lot of things to be done, but we can see a prosperous atmosphere. The great unification of 9 regions, which has not been seen for tens of thousands of years, has finally been achieved. Even the destroyed Southern Heaven region has been reborn in just a few months. I believe that in less than 100 years, we can be ready for migration. The woman whispered and then picked up the wine gourd and drank for half a day. So, you can rest assured that 9 regions will have a bright and beautiful future. It will. So, you can go in peace. I will take good care of your legacy, including the treasures that have been buried in 9 regions for many years, including your wisdom sect that has an amazing ability to accumulate wealth, including little Lu Li Zhu Shiyao. Before she finished speaking, the blue sky and white clouds above her head suddenly turned black, and a thick thunderbolt fell from the sky. Bitch, I'm supervising the work in the Southern Heaven region. It's fine if you're lazy and don't work hard, but you're also cursing me here? Chapter 849. All troops attack. In the vast desert, Xiang Liang, dressed in golden armor, held a flag and a spear and issued a declaration of decisive battle to the Western Continent army in the sky. Behind Xiang Liang was a large army mixed with Western Continent people, 9 regions people, and even creatures from the special world. Following Xiang Liang's order, they mightily rushed to the other side of the desert. This was an expeditionary army from 9 regions that crossed the endless sea. Although they had just experienced a fierce battle with the immortal world, most of the soldiers had not recovered from their injuries. Bandages and plasters could be seen everywhere in the gaps of their armors. Although their appearance was far from gorgeous, their morale was high and completely above their opponents. The gods of the pantheon had indeed unified the Western continent early on. However, this kind of rule based on sucking the marrow out of the bones obviously could not last long. After Golden King was defeated and retreated to 9 regions, the resistance forces in the Western continent sprang up like bamboo shoots after a spring rain. Then, of course, they were ruthlessly suppressed by the gods. Several times, the Western continent people, like domesticated wolves, lost their blood and became completely like meat dogs, waiting to be slaughtered. In the face of such an opponent, even if 9 regions came up with a group of defeated soldiers, they would still have an overall advantage. Not to mention that most of the people in the expeditionary army had gained a lot of benefits when the immortal king fell. Although their injuries had not yet healed, their strength and stage had been improved. The confrontation between the 2 armies only took half a day to determine the outcome of the battle. The Western Continent army was completely routed. Xiang Liang mercilessly gave the order to pursue and kill the enemy. They chased the enemy for thousands of miles and completely annihilated them. After the war, the expeditionary army reveled for 3 days to celebrate this decisive victory. Only Xiang Liang looked lonely and there was no joy on his face. When asked, he could only smile bitterly without saying anything. The victory was certainly a victory, but the victory was just a cold leftover. The real feast had already been enjoyed by the others long ago. Before the expeditionary army landed in the Western continent, Aya and Golden King had led a few elites of the expeditionary army directly to the pantheon and cut the group of gods who were sucking the marrow out of the bones. That battle was really earth-shattering. Although Golden King and Aya were the nominal leaders, their cultivation base was not high in the battlefield. The real main force was Wang Wu, who had restored the 3,000 king pill, and the people of the immortal world who surrendered to 9 regions. With these strong soldiers and fierce generals, the pantheon, which was once comparable to the immortal world, was smashed into the mortal world by the people of 9 regions, creating a terrifying pit in the Western continent. Even the surrounding thousands of miles were corroded by the fallen pantheon and turned into a desert. As for the army commanded by Xiang Liang, it was more like a sweeper after the war. It could not be said that it was meaningless, but it was obviously not comparable to the battle in the pantheon. When he thought that he inherited the flag of the strongest army in 9 regions, but could not show his skill on the real battlefield, Xiang Liang naturally did not feel happy. However, the current royal soldier sect really could not afford a heavier burden. In the war against the immortal world, royal soldier sect suffered the most losses. Twice they formed the Red Guards, and both times they were nearly wiped out. The tragedy of royal soldier sect was comparable to the catastrophe of Spirit Sword Mountain. The reason why Xiang Liang was able to shoulder the position of the sect leader was also because those loyal ministers who had assisted Xueqi had long since died. After 3 days of revelry, Xiang Liang led the army back to 9 regions. After a long sigh with a mysterious person, his fighting spirit was rekindled. However, in the past, the ancestors could cut through the thistles and thorns and lay the foundation of royal soldier sect, so why can't I do it again in my hands? The Western Continent expedition is just the beginning. In the new world, there must be endless battles waiting for me. The Western Continent expedition was a disaster for the pantheon, and even the Western Continent. However, in the eyes of many people in 9 regions, it was just an episode in the post-war reconstruction. After defeating the immortal king, the self-confidence of the people of 9 regions completely exploded, and they didn't put the people of Western Continent in their eyes at all. However, the significance of this expedition was very far-reaching. First, it was to cut off the last worry. From then on, no one in the world could threaten the safety of 9 regions. Second, as a spoil of war, the Western Continent was actually very fertile. Although because of the face of Golden King, there was no way to directly merge this continent together. After the Western Continent was plundered by the pantheon, Golden King often felt bored with this land that was no longer complete. Coupled with the bait that a certain spirit of 9 regions constantly threw out, It seemed like abandoning his hometown to merge with 9 regions was just around the corner. With the Western continent, the next major plan of 9 regions would have a bit more chance of success. Above the clouds in 10,000 Arts Sect. In the position that once belonged to Supreme Tianluan, there was now a young figure. However, compared with Supreme Tianluan, who was always calm and collected, the temper of this successor seemed to be very violent. He kept roaring at a communication talisman. Is there a new calculation task? We haven't finished the backlog of tasks from half a month ago, and now there's a new one? How many batches is this? It's the 13th batch. Are you trying to force people to die? Is the life of an intellectual not a life? Tell Wang Lu not to push his luck. We, the people of 10,000 Arts Sect, are engaged in academic research, not his human calculator. If he wants to calculate the best path to cross the wall of worlds, let him do it himself. After roaring, Zhang Zai took a breath, and then his expression gradually became cold. Countless numbers and symbols flashed in front of his eyes, and his mouth also muttered something. The whole cloud began to flash with lightning, responding to his command at the fastest speed. Zhou Mumu, who watched all this from the side, couldn't help but laugh. Pfft, you belong to the type of person who says no, but your body is very honest. On one hand, you complain that Wang Lu has made you a cow and a horse, but on the other hand, you can't help but see the calculation task that he gave you. Zhang Zai snorted. This is academic spirit. What do you know? Although he said that, his tone involuntarily softened. If the current 10,000 Arts Sect saw this, they would definitely sigh with emotion that the 10,000 motionless immortal heart of this new sect leader must have been cultivated to a dog's body. Zhou Mumu couldn't help but laugh. Ha ha ha, good. You're good at academics. Then I'll give you a problem. Why don't you calculate it? Zhang Zai was very confident in this kind of provocation in his field of expertise. Let me hear it. What day do you think is better for our wedding? Poof. On the other side, in the center of the 9 regions, Qianghua slowly walked down the altar. There were still a few beads of sweat on her forehead. Even with her current strength, the sacrificial ceremony just now was still extremely strenuous, because it should have been completed by a supreme-level powerhouse like He Tuesday. Although she inherited the position of sect leader of He Tu, and in terms of pure fighting ability, she didn't lose too much to He Tu, but her essence was, after all, far worse than a real supreme. Naturally, many of her fellow sect members were puzzled by this. Jianglu, who had now been promoted to the position of elder, asked, Senior Sister Sect Leader, right now, there are many things to do in the Immortal Sect, so there's no need to waste too much time and energy on the sacrificial ceremony of the 9 regions, right? Qianghua lightly glanced at him. Do you think it's not necessary? Being stared at by her, Jianglu suddenly felt guilty. You just think that Shangjing Sect shouldn't be so submissive to someone? Jianglu, haven't you seen where the future of Shangjing Sect lies? Cold sweat kept pouring down from Jianglu's forehead, but at this moment, he had no choice but to boldly say, but Shangjing Sect has always been unyielding, even if the cooperation with Wang Lu can benefit the common people, do you still have to maintain the face of Shangjing Sect and resist to the end? Right now, Wang Lu needs Shangjing Sect, but Shangjing Sect needs Wang Lu even more. I know that some of these words are not your original intention, but some people pushed you out. Go back and tell them that I don't want to hear anyone make any similar sound again, understand? After sending away Jianglu, Qianghua stood on the altar for a long time. Just now those words were naturally said to someone, but it seemed that he had no intention to respond. In recent years, he spoke less and less. Most of the time he just listened. Perhaps this was inevitable. To transform a living person into a land spirit, especially a huge thing like the 9 regions, it was almost inevitable that he would be assimilated by the earth and lose his humanity. Thinking of this, Qianghua was somewhat sad. Her relationship with Wang Lu had never been harmonious. However, losing such an opponent really made her feel lonely. Wang Lu, if you really want to stop at the level of the land spirit of 9 regions, when we reach the new world, I will surpass you. Chapter 850. 100 years passed by like a white steed. Looking back, the earth-shattering war had arrived on the 100-year anniversary. A lot of things happened in the past 100 years. Some of the once all-powerful people still stood on the stage of 9 regions, some quietly retired, and some changed their ambition halfway, riding off the glory of the first half of their lives. Xueqi stood on the podium of the 100-year anniversary and looked down at the tens of thousands of cultivators who gathered below. Suddenly, there was endless emotion in her heart. Fortunately, in the supreme stage, her immortal heart was clear and free of dirt, which allowed her to suppress the palpitation in her heart and play the role of the leader of the Wanxian League. Under the focus of countless people, Xueqi gently opened her mouth and recited the speech that had already been prepared. She recalled the invasion of the immortal world 100 years ago, when countless people with lofty ideals shed their blood and finally turned the tide. Among them, there were not only the brilliance of a few heroes, but also the silent dedication of all living beings in 9 regions. She also recalled the glorious achievements of the post-war reconstruction of 9 regions in the past 100 years. The Southern Heaven region was reshaped, the disordered spiritual veins in various places were resorted, and the broken mountains and rivers were repaired. The new generation of cultivators grew up one after another. What was even more gratifying was that in the past 100 years, geniuses and heroes emerged one after another. After that, Xueqi talked about the next 100 years. The journey to the new world had begun. Xiaoyao, the pioneer who left 9 regions 100 years ago, successfully left a precious road sign in the Wall of Worlds, which guided future generations to move forward on the main path. 50 years ago, Zhan Zai and Zhou Mumu worked hard to complete the preliminary calculation of the Wall of Worlds. 10 years ago, Immortal Feng Yin of Lingjian School led many immortals to open a gap in the Wall of Worlds at the cost of 1,000 years of deep sleep, from which the dawn of the new world poured out, which was called the One-Line Sky. 5 years ago, Senior Immortal Non-Phase went deep into the One-Line Sky alone and expanded the gap 10 times, which almost formed a broad path. However, after completing the feat, there was no news of Senior Immortal Non-Phase. Today, Xueqi stood on the podium of the 100-year anniversary and announced the official start of the expedition to the New World. Under the podium, the cheers were deafening. In the past 100 years, the legend of the New World had long been deeply rooted in people's hearts. It was said that there was an ideal land beyond the Wall of Worlds that was better than the immortal world, with countless resources and wealth that could satisfy all beautiful fantasies. The celestial world was destroyed, but the new world became the new celestial world. It became the supreme place in people's hearts. On the stage, Xueqi felt sad. There was no ideal village. Everything in the new world was unknown. At present, Senior Immortal Non-Phase, who was the deepest in the Wall of Worlds, still had not sent back any message, and Senior Immortal Xiaoyao did not see any beautiful fantasy at the end of his journey 100 years ago. What's more, there were countless difficulties and obstacles before arriving at the new world. The journey to the new world was not a journey for a small number of people, but the migration of the entire 9 regions. The space requirement was extremely harsh. Even the most mature One-Line Sky could only accommodate the compressed 9 regions and barely pass smoothly. Once the mature region was crossed, the cultivators would have to overcome the obstacles. According to Zhan Zai's calculations, the most ideal outcome was to maintain the current development intensity for 500 years. After that, there was an 80% chance that a spacious passageway would be directly excavated. However, that was of course impossible. 9 regions had long been overwhelmed. In the last 100 years, the emergence of heroes was basically the final radiance of the setting sun, and the surrounding spiritual energy was also constantly decreasing. How could a world that was already on the brink of death be filled with vitality? In recent decades, no one had heard the voice of the land spirit Wang Lu. He was still there, but he was so tired and weak that he couldn't even speak. Senior Immortal Non-Phase entering the One-Line Sky alone was also related to the weakness of Wang Lu. Looking at the spirit stone statue of Wang Lu in the center of the ceremonial platform, Xueqi's heart was filled with emotion. 100 years ago, she used Wang Lu as a goal to motivate herself to move forward. Now, Wang Lu seemed to have stopped moving forward, but she felt that the distance between them was getting farther and farther away. Looking at the passage that led to the One-Line Sky opened by Immortal Feng Yin, Xueqi had a smile on her face, but her heart was slightly cold. Behind this passageway, was it a colorful new world, or a pitch-black deathly stillness? Unfortunately, no matter what the answer was, for the current 9 regions, there was no other choice. History was probably the most flexible thing in the world. Even if it was a long river of hundreds of thousands or millions of years, even if it was the most glorious time when heroes came forth in large numbers, it could be compressed into a few pieces of thin yellow paper, which could be commented on by later generations. The New World expedition of 9 regions was such a history. If the story was written in detail, it would be too numerous to be written down. However, when it was compressed, it could be summarized in a few pages. In the spring of the year 6500 of the 9 regions calendar, the expedition entered the 20th year. Generally speaking, everything went smoothly, if not compared with the original plan. The difficulty and danger in the Wall of Worlds is well deserved. I really doubt how Senior Immortal Xiaoyao could persist to this point with his broken body. We found the last road sign left by Senior Immortal Xiaoyao, as well as the bodies of him and his wife. They probably experienced considerable torture before they died. Their bodies were broken, but when they embraced each other and fell asleep, they could still vaguely see a smile. Unfortunately, we, the later generations, can't smile. According to the original plan, we should have reached this point within 10 years, but now it has taken twice as long. I don't want to criticize anyone, because everyone's efforts are visible, but sometimes people have to wonder if it's wrong for the predecessors to pin all their hopes on us. If the heroes who turned the tide in the Great Era were still there, perhaps the expedition would not be so difficult. Today, I once again worshipped the patron saint of 9 regions. I seemed to hear his voice, but my companions all laughed at me for having an illusion. In the winter of the 653rd year of the 9 regions calendar, the winter of 9 regions turned out to be so cold. I accompanied Supreme Qianghua on a tour of 9 regions and saw that the earth was covered with snow everywhere. Although this silver-wrapped scene was gorgeous, it chilled people's heart. Such a harsh winter had never happened in the past thousands of years. Especially after the feng shui of 9 regions was sorted out, there should not be such an extreme climate. The immortal cultivators could not be affected by the cold and heat, so they were not deeply affected by this harsh winter. However, the mortal world suffered heavy losses. Senior Sister Qianghua allocated part of the manpower for disaster relief, but unfortunately, it was a drop in the bucket. Right now, opening up the passage was the most important thing, and there was no way to demand more from her. However, the cruel scene in the mortal world was really like hell, giving people nightmares. Senior Sister said that my immortal heart cultivation was not enough, so I think it's probably true. In the summer of 6510th year of the 9 regions calendar, there was a great drought. After the severe winter 7 years ago and the flood 5 years ago, we actually ushered in another great drought. The food output of 9 regions plummeted by 70%, and hunger was everywhere in the mortal world. Even the immortal cultivation sects were inevitably affected, and some low-level cultivators even began to starve. Senior Sister Qianghua said that this was because the lifespan of 9 regions was coming to an end and could no longer provide enough nutrients. If we can't reach the new world as soon as possible and get new life, such a disaster would only increase day by day. In the spring of 6515th year of the 9 regions calendar, the eastern border region's Panjin sect was destroyed by the heavenly tribulation thunder, and no one survived. The laws of 9 regions became more and more chaotic, and even the heavenly tribulation became willful. The lifespan of 9 regions was obviously coming to an end, but instead, it began to squander its remaining strength, which was really a waste. The people around me all said so, but few people cared about the casualties of the Panjin sect. In the autumn of 6520th year of the 9 regions calendar, Senior Sister Qianghua gave a report on the 50-year expedition. She really knows how to talk. In this form, she could also inspire people and make people fight. In the past 50 years, we have made brilliant achievements, and a beautiful future is in front of us. If it weren't for the fact that I also participated in the drafting of her speech, perhaps I would have believed it. Everyone said that it was a wise move for Senior Sister Qianghua to conceal the result of Zhan Zai's calculation 50 years ago. According to the original plan, 9 regions must break through the Wall of Worlds within 40 years. Otherwise, there would be unpredictable consequences. In the past 10 years, Senior Brother Zhan Zai has no longer carried out any calculation. Perhaps he did, but Senior Sister Qianghua didn't let him say it. In the winter of 6525th year of the 9 regions calendar, Senior Sister Qianghua said that we all have to prepare for hibernation. The last strong wall of the Wall of Worlds has finally been broken. However, there is still a smooth but long road to the new world. This road is beyond anyone's expectation, and there is no such thing in the original plan. It will take at least 50 years for the 9 regions to cross over, but according to the current rate of decline, in 10 years at most, the 9 regions will fall apart and become pieces of lifeless gravel and soil. And those of us who have lost our ships will be lost in the Wall of Worlds forever. Entering hibernation is the best choice. We will sleep along the inertia for 50 years until we resuscitation in the new world. Senior sister Cheonghua said that she would personally serve as the night watchman. Many people came to persuade her, but of course, they could not persuade her. It is said that after the death of Uncle Hichu, there was only one person in 9 regions who could persuade senior sister. So I prayed in front of his statue for a long time. I seemed to hear him say that he would help me, but when I resuscitation, I found myself buried in snow. It was my senior brothers who dug me out. Perhaps those words are just illusions. In the winter of 65-26 year of the 9 regions calendar, I am the last group of cultivators to enter hibernation. Along with me are the fellow Taoists of Lingjian School. This is the first time I have met the people of Lingjian School at a close distance, and I feel like I have entered the country of women. Lu Li, Zhu Shiyao, Bai Shixian, Quan Zouhua, Yu Xinyao. Nowadays, the leaders of the Heavenly Sword Hall are almost all women. I chatted with my junior sisters before going to bed, and everyone guessed that this must be the bad taste of the former lead disciple of Lingjian School. However, seeing the smile on the faces of the people of Lingjian School, we can't help but have more confidence in the future. After all, if the guardian god of 9 regions is still here, he would at least bless the safety of his fellow disciples, right? Well, this diary should end here. I don't know when I will open it again, and I don't even know who it will be. I just hope. The handwriting stopped abruptly. Many years later. Closing the thin book, the young man was so excited that he couldn't help but make dozens of somersaults on the spot and uttered an unknown strange cry. While exploring the mountains with his companions, he accidentally got lost. In the fog, he inexplicably came to a cave and inexplicably met an old man in a cloak who hid his facial features. Actually, he couldn't tell the age of the other party. He only felt that the other party's breath was long, so he must be a senior expert. After a few casual words, he got a thin book, but unexpectedly, there was a priceless treasure in the book. After a long time, he calmed down, somewhat ashamedly scratched his head, and then said to the senior expert in front of him, "Thank you for lending me this book. It's of great significance to the historical textual research. It's enough to fill many gaps in the current research. I told you, the miraculous expedition must exist. This world definitely didn't appear out of thin air. But now everyone doesn't believe it. It's ridiculous to say that the Big Bang Theory is just ridiculous. Even if the Big Bang can blow up this beautiful world, what about the immortal ruins everywhere? Could it be that the thunder body technique came out of thin air from the Big Bang?" After complaining, the young man somewhat reluctantly looked at the book in his hand. "Senior, I don't know. Sure, I'll give this book to you. If you're interested in history, I have some other things here that might be able to help you." With that, the senior took out a few yellowed books from his cloak. The young man's eyes instantly widened. Although these books had a long history, no one knew how many years they had been through, but the immortal spirit aura left in them was incredibly pure, which was absolutely not something that anyone could forge. These are, the senior said, they're just nonsense left by a few old guys. The story is too distant, so it may not be useful to you, but it's good to read as a novel. The young man took the book, flipped through it twice, and couldn't come back to his senses. After an unknown amount of time, the young man was stimulated by the bloating feeling in his lower abdomen, as if he had just woken up from a dream. I'm sorry, senior. I accidentally became fascinated. But, where did you find these books?" "It's in this cave, just a few more miles down." The young man was instantly shocked and hurriedly ran inside, but it was pitch black in front of him, so deep that he couldn't see the bottom, which made him feel a chill in his heart. The young man tried to take 2 steps forward, but was pushed back by an invisible force. The senior smiled slightly. Although his facial features were hidden in the cloak, the young man knew that he was smiling. "That's why I said that you and I are fated. I haven't seen a stranger for many years. I haven't had the chance to say goodbye to many of my old friends all these years. Now that I'm full of energy, I see that my wife left a book by my pillow, saying that she had gathered enough public food while I was sleeping, and that she was going to take the girls out to continue looking for fun. I was about to go out and find trouble with her, but the first person I saw was you. Logically speaking, outsiders can't enter this place, but no one can say for sure if it's a coincidence." The young man swallowed his saliva, and vaguely felt that he was about to experience the greatest adventure of his life. The senior stood up and waved his hand. Immediately, the pitch-black darkness in the cave dispersed, revealing light. A strong immortal aura slowly leaked out, causing the young man to be shocked. Even though he was a historian and not an expert in cultivation, he knew that there were probably countless divine weapons hidden in the cave. "I'll leave the things here to you. My wife has taken all the valuable things anyway. Sigh, after sleeping for so long, the first thing I do after waking up is to collect debts from others. These days are really hard. Young man, let's meet again if fate allows it." The young man couldn't hear clearly what the senior was saying. He stood at the entrance of the cave and looked inside, dazed by the sparkling treasures. The immortal civilization on this continent had just been born, and many things were far from mature. Although the senior said that the treasures in the cave were only leftovers, they were already far beyond his imagination. With these, he was practically ascending to immortality in one step. Old senior, what exactly is this place?" The man was about to get up and leave, but when he heard this question, he stopped and replied, "I don't know where this place is now, but before, there was a spirit sword mountain here." You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.